everyone, and welcome to Knights of Last Call Night School, a special edition, because this is a Patreon winter break holiday special edition, because I am joined by three of our hero tier patrons. We've got Ben, we've got Strat, and we've got Pumpkin, who have all sort of jumped together in the last 2 hours to put this stream together. So welcome, gentlemen. Ben, welcome.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you.
That's all right. Now, you may recognize Ben. Ben was on our horror stream just a couple of weeks ago, but Ben is back along with Pumpkin and Strat, who recently have been running a lot of games in a variety of different systems. Ben all over the place. Pumpkin and Strat, two of our most prodigious Northern Reaches creators and game runners and game players. And so, you know, we kind of put this group together, this motley crew, if you will, because there's been a lot of buzz on the Knights of Last Call Patreon. And I'm assuming a lot of people here today are probably from the Patreon. And yeah, so we were talking about this hashtag Dungeon23 and where that's coming from and what does that mean. And Ben, independently, I'm assuming maybe because of Questing Beast's video, Ben.
Yeah, it was because of Ben Milton's video.
Yeah. Ben Milton from Questing Beast did a video about it. But about a month ago, Sean McCoy of Tuesday Night Games made a tweet about just a fun project that he was going to try to do. And he was putting it out there into the, onto Twitter, hey, some other people should join me, of just using like a calendar planner and designing a dungeon or creating a dungeon with one room a day, every day for the entire year, which happens to be a leap year, and just going through that creative exercises. And when you're done, you will have a mega dungeon. And this thing has caught a little bit of wind in the interwebs, especially amongst the OSR community, because the mega dungeon is sort of a lost, forgotten art. Certainly that is the way that the game was originally played. To a certain extent, and our story-focused games have sort of moved away from that. But even in the OSR, I think there was this kind of real honeymoon period with like sort of the one-page dungeon, where it was almost more of an abstract dungeon map with more of ideas than it was sort of specifically spelled out. And so here's an opportunity to really kind of dig into this. So we started talking about this. We created a section on our Discord for people who might be interested as sort of a support group. And we started talking about it, and Ben said, Derek, why don't we just talk about this on a live stream? So I said, sure. And Strat and Pumpkin, I think we're voluntold by Vin to come out here and do this.
Thanks, Vin.
And to be fair, Pumpkin, you said yourself, you don't really have a lot of experience with Megadungeons. And so this is a great opportunity for us to sort of, kind of talk as a group. Obviously, chat, we'd love to hear from you as well. Rick, thank you.
Rick has tipped $10, chipping in to support the channel.
Rick does chipping in to support the channel. Thank you, Rick, for that tip. Thank you. Of course, please show your support. Super chats and tips are welcome, and all that other jazz. Thank you, Rick. But yeah, we're going to be kind of watching chat, and if you have a thought or comment, we'll try to grab it from the chat here. But really, this is sort of a conversation amongst the four of us, and how if you all want to kind of chime in or step in, feel free to. So Ben, that was kind of my spiel. This is kind of your idea. So Ben, what got you interested about this? Like, let's talk about that. Right?
Okay. So there are maybe three components to this conversation, right? The first is the philosophical part of it, which to me right away, because I am a proceduralist. And I love the idea of having something where you're laying it out instead of over a month. It's an entire year where you're just coming up with an idea, a section, an area every day. And at the end of the year, you have something that's been poured over for a year, refined, really made to be a finished product or as close to a finished product as you have. Because just because you are designing an area and you go to another area, once you start seeing maybe some little inconsistencies, there's no reason why you can't go back and smooth those over, and you'll end up with something, even if it's not a full 366, this year's a leap year, so a 366 room or area mega sprawling thing. Even if you have 100 or 150 areas, which is still massive, but it's really been refined and thought about, and because you don't have a deadline of a session you have to run with it,
Right.
to really be able to give yourself the space to create something very open and very unfettered. You don't, it's a mega dungeon is by its very name isn't supposed to be small or confined. So you can let your imagination go crazy. And we'll talk about ideas for areas and stuff. That's the one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is the mega dungeon itself, the idea of having something that's kind of like the prog rock of dungeon design, right?
Right.
It's very self-indulgent. It's really kind of pompous and loud and hangs out and does its thing. So that's the other component of it. And then the last, probably the smallest component for me is the design aspect of it, where trying out new methodologies, trying out new ideas, honing, even after doing this for 4 decades, still honing that craft, making it a little bit tighter every time, realizing in my own mechanisms what work and doesn't work as I'm going through it. And it's a chance to do like rehearsal, where you might have a section of a dungeon that, you might be like, I really like this part. You could cut that part out and drop it in another game you're running. But in the background, you still have that's just part of a much bigger, sprawling kind of thing. So for me, that's kind of what interested me. As I saw the video, I went, this just ticks all the boxes for me. I reached into my box of gaming paper. I grabbed a brand new roll, and I will be unfurling it. And every day I'll be adding.
The first element, Sean McCoy is like, do it in a little hand notebook planner. Ben's like, I'm doing mine on a sprawling sheet of paper. So I think that's a great take, and I think that's pretty accurate. But I'm going to start with you, Strat, and then I'm going to go to you, Pumpkin. But like, what do you think of when you hear the term mega dungeon? What does that mean to you?
Stone hell.
Stone hell. Okay.
Yeah. Classic,
and that's part of the OSR. Who did that? Gillipsy?
I don't actually know, but it's it's just like page after page of one. There's a level on a page with like 50 rooms in it, and then like the next 2 pages are keys for it. Very classic dungeon thing. It has different themes and different levels. Good source of idea mining. It has like 2 pages of backstory and like an overarching theme about that explains why this dungeon exists.
Yeah, I mean that's a classic example. And then Pumpkin, you say you don't have a whole lot of experience here, so
I'm the noob here. So I don't have a ton of experience with mega dungeons. We were talking in the Discord earlier, and I think Steven was like, "Oh yeah, this had 70 rooms in it." I'm like, "That seems like a mega dungeon to me. 70 rooms seems like a lot," but I'm very much from the new school, so I haven't really gotten to experience the big mega dungeon with. I don't know how many even rooms is it to be considered a mega dungeon.
That's a great question. I think there, I don't think that's a hard and fast line, that defines something between the two of them. I think for me, a mega dungeon is the idea of, it's taking the concept of, so this is why to me it is a beautiful craft. It is taking, so let's go back to something, we've talked about this on Night School before. What is a dungeon? Okay. Here's what a dungeon is. Forget what it is physically. What a dungeon is, it is the single greatest player aid to a Dungeons and Dragons dungeon master or to a tabletop role-playing game, aficionado that ever existed. Okay. The game itself functions perfectly in a dungeon, but it's not just because of the way that the feats and classes and races, and hey, we got a super chat from John with a question, and we'll get to that question, John. It's also a logistical thing, because here's what I want to do. I want to let my players roam free and do whatever they want to do. So in theory, the best place to do that would be where? It would be to do it in the overworld on a hex crawl, where they could go literally anywhere and do anything. Here's the problem. That sounds great. Here's the problem. That's really, really freaking tough to prepare, right? Dungeons allow the player, you say, you can go anywhere, but you have to go to rooms that exist, right? Like you can't go to room 27 if there is no room 27. You can only go left, right, and straight because that's where the corridors go. Dungeons provide a way to take this amorphous problem and sort of discrete it, create a discrete set of problems where you say, look, there are this many rooms, you can go to these rooms, and obviously design enters into the equation where, if it's literally room 1 leads to room 2, leads to room 3, leads to room 4, okay, well now we have a bit of a problem. But you create this, sense of space and you say, you can go explore here. That's a dungeon. So what's a mega dungeon? To me, a mega dungeon is a campaign or a sizable section of a campaign that is designed to play inside that space for many, many, many levels, and where exploration is the sort of name of the game, where exploring this space rather than we're trying to, get the MacGuffin to advance to the plot, to the next thing. This is a place that you kind of live in and breathe in. And, it's like a national park that has hundreds of trails. You don't expect to go there for one weekend and hit all the trails. No, you might spend decades going back to that, park. Hey, I've never gone to the North Rim. I want to explore the North Rim. Hey, I love this trail in the fall. Let's go hit it up, even though I've been on it before. A mega dungeon creates this sense of familiarity, and yet all of the mechanics of the dungeon tie in super well to these familiar elements that we're used to in our D20 games. Secret doors and traps and monsters and treasure. It all makes sense in that space.
One thing I will add to that is that to make it the mega dungeon, not the dungeon, there needs to be a sense of inexhaustibility of the place.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, I know what I was going to say too. So there are tropes around the mega dungeon, right? A mega dungeon is considered what they call a tentpole type of campaign, where you have one centralized thing that is self-contained, usually has some type of safe haven not too far from it. And then you have the ability to go back and forth from the safe haven back to the tentpole, back and forth. You kind of create this cycle so you can regenerate characters as needed. You can regenerate other resources as needed, like henchmen, hirelings, or if you need, you come across part of the dungeon that's written in a language you don't understand, then you have to go back, find a sage, bring them back, and have them translate whatever it is to get to the next section, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing for me, a mega dungeon should not just be a campaign or of a campaign length, whatever that means, but ideally it should take your character from level 1 to either name level or level cap, whatever cap you have, but typically to name level. So it should cover at least 9 or 10 levels of play.
Yeah, I think that there's something to be said about that. Yeah, Pumpkin.
Okay, so whether it's a good mega dungeon or not, Abomination Vaults in PF2, that is an example of a mega dungeon.
It is. I think it's a very small one, but the only problem I have, and this is minor spoiler alert, but there is this sort of BBEG in Abomination Vaults, right? That you are trying to get to the bottom. In other words, there's a sense that, hey, if we just took our time to go explore this dungeon because we wanted to get sick loots, there's a feeling there of self-indulgence, of almost not being good, because you're like, oh, hey, aren't we supposed to be trying to stop this person from doing her evil plan and, destroying the world or destroying, Absalom or whatever. And I think that those elements can hurt a dungeon, because the moment you put the players on a clock, they are going to start to, be like, oh, I can't explore. I can't go down this path. I can't, it feels wrong to be doing so. But I do want to address John's super chat because he was so nice enough to pay some money there. John says, how do you guys, and again, we won't get too into I'm sure we'll cover this at length, but John says, how do you guys make a mega dungeon make sense? What strats do you employ to give reasons why monsters don't just come up to different layers, or why once the seal is broken, things don't just pour out into the world? John, I think number one, I think you're right. I think you should think about those things. Number two, I don't think you need to worry, as like they call this Gygaxian naturalism, where like you're like, what are they eating, and how much, where do they get oxygen from, and a proper source of water. I don't think you need to. I mean, there might be people out there who really want to think of those things, but I don't think you need to go that far into the deep. Yeah, Strat.
Yeah, I'm one of those people who went who's like all about Gygaxian naturalism.
That's what I was going to say. Strat, he's one of those.
Yeah, worry about toilets or anything like that.
Yeah,
or water pressure.
Like, I don't think it's crazy that you should, put that in there. But I'll say this: my favorite mega dungeons, and the mega dungeons that I have created, the mega dungeons I have run, the mega dungeons I've stolen and modified. The mega dungeon isn't just some random hole in the ground. Okay, it is sort of the big thing, right? We're talking, sleeping god buried in the earth. We're talking portal to hell, that is open. We're talking like there's got to be something big there, massive. It needs to be a defining. Maybe it is like it's one of the core structures of your campaign. And maybe that's all in the ancient past, and now people just know it as sort of this thing. But it shouldn't be something that's unknown. It should be legendary, right? There should be rumors and people. You might even have whole economies set up to sort of service the area surrounding these things. So this isn't just some unknown thing. And then as for the monsters, kind of balancing it. I mean, the classic example is things get more challenging as you go deeper, and there was always this idea that occasionally you will find monsters that extend above or below the level that they are going to be. And, especially if it's driven by the players, that could be some of the most fun parts of the dungeon campaign. And for me, that's the gimme of it. But ultimately, I don't think you should worry as much about that, John. I mean, that's my real answer. I think, for me, first and foremost, you should be focused on creating a place that is fun from a game perspective. I talk about this in night school a lot, but for me, Ben was talking about the design element. For me, designing a dungeon is about, it's like a game board. I want it to be an interesting set of decisions and choices. I want the map itself to be sort of a fun game board. But that's my first concern, is just making it a fun experience.
I think to that point too, you have, if you look at the big mega dungeons, by big I mean the successful ones, right? The real popular ones that have come out in the last 10 years or so, let's say. The one that really changed the game and kind of will feed back to John's question of it and maybe answer it in terms of a point of research that you might want to check out, John, is Barrow Maze by Gillespie. Because Barrow Maze, what he did was he took mega dungeon, but instead of stacking it this way, where you would have a lot of those issues that are inherent with doing a mega dungeon, where typically the first level is for level 1 party, 2, 3, etc., going on and on and on and on. Let's say you had 9 levels deep, party could expect to hit level 9 at the bottom. If you want them to go to 20, it should have 20 levels. Instead, what he did with Barrow Maze was he did it all horizontally. So it is just a massive, like 600 room dungeon sprawling. And guess what? You can be at any entry point and you could be level 1 and a specter just comes. It's one of the wandering monsters and that's it. It's game over. If that session ends, campaign done, you got to make new characters come back. But that happens where they kind of exist. And then that's where factions come into play when you're thinking about something like a mega dungeon where you have, okay, this area, for example, is where the kobolds live. The kobolds made a deal with the next bigger thing up the food chain so that they provide something that they need. There's some kind of symbiosis. So it keeps the real nasty stuff from coming through. You know what it is? It's basically Escape from New York. Escape from New York is a great mega dungeon. The way it's set it runs exactly like a mega dungeon. The way the movie works, the characters are Snake Plissken. They have to get the president of the United States, ostensibly he's with the ring. I hope I'm not spoiling this movie for anyone, but it is old enough. You should all have seen it.
One second there, Ben, but shout out to Self-Confessed Cynic for the super chat. Shout out to Diablo 1. Yes, I mean, it's a bit hack and slashy, but yes, I mean, in theory, that is pretty much a mega dungeon of sorts. Please continue, Ben. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, no worries. So the idea of in Barrow Maze, for example, the way you get access to the Barrow Maze is from this marsh that has all these barrow mounds, and some of them have entries that go into the maze beneath, some don't. And you just have to break down doors and go into crypt after crypt after crypt after crypt till finally you find one that actually goes down. Then when you go down, you have no idea what part it is because they're all aligned. So you could be a level 3 party at that point, let's say, and you happen to find stair, and you're in a level 15 section and there's harpies and you get torn to shreds, and that's the end of you, or whatever the case may be.
You don't have to design it like that.
No, but that's the plus and minus of having something like that, where if it's built like this and there's a lot of this kind of lateral movement between the monsters inside, it quickly becomes very difficult to manage. Whereas the more classic approach, where level 1, you're going to be at level 1, you kind of have the suspension of disbelief that level 1 will allow a level 1 party to survive. Level 2, a little bit harder. Level 3, so on and so forth. It just, like you said, it makes it easier to play.
Please, Strat.
And the OSR also has like the OSR has confronted this problem a while ago of like, why do creatures do what they do? Why didn't you just like, why is level 1 and all of that? And like the most common answer I've seen to that come up is this idea of the like Mythic Underworld. Like this is like straight up not our reality anymore. The rules are different there. This place hates you, but it plays by its own rules. This is why doors are stuck for you, but not the monsters. Like that this is like very much taking this concept of like the hero's journey and baking it into the world and the dungeon. And so the lower levels have the higher level creatures because they can only really exist there because above you're too close to normal reality.
Yeah, no, and I think that, and I want to, I see some people in chat talking about something, and I want to be clear about something. I was talking about Gygaxian naturalism, meaning like, what do these creatures eat? And I was saying, I don't worry about that stuff. That doesn't mean I don't like the dungeon to make sense. In fact, my personal opinion is the number one thing that kills dungeons, not just mega dungeons, but dungeons period, is when they essentially feel like a random collection of random encounters. When it just feels like a bunch of rooms filled with completely random odds and ends. I think that is bad, okay? And I know on this channel and on this Discord, we talk about, random procedural generation all the time. But I personally believe that it does a great disservice at times for Mega Dungeons. And here's why. Because I think that for me, part of the fun of the Mega Dungeon is the exploration of learning the history. And the best Mega Dungeons are designed like onions, right, with layers. And there's the old history from 10,000 years in the past. And then some conqueror came and conquered the dungeon. It was the head of their empire. And then they got taken out. And then demons held, and then there was a couple centuries where this was the angelic capital of the universe because they came in and destroyed the demons and claimed the power, and then they got wiped out, and so on and so on and so forth. And it's like layers of history. And I like for that stuff to sometimes be present. As for the weird stuff, I have a rule, which is weird. It gets weird as you go down, right? Like the first level or two of a dungeon, goblins in, you're the cracked masonry walls, the frescoes and the pillars, tattered tapestries, right? Things that you've read a million times. 10 levels down, underground garden with artificial sun and strange plant people who have their own thriving ecosystem, right? Like the game should just, you know why? Because fuck it. By the time you're 10th level, your characters can walk through walls and they can sprout fucking wings from their backpacks and shit. They're weird shit too, right? Level 1, they're not weird. Level 1, characters are people, right? By the time you're level 10 or 15, they're weird as shit too. So the game can sort of keep up with them. And yeah, at low levels, the door is a wooden door. And at level 17, it's a fluctuating force field. All the doors are prismatic walls. Right? Like it could be whatever you need it to be. And the game sometimes needs that because otherwise you get shit like, well, it's a door, but it's DC 38 to break it. Well, why? I don't know. It's a level 17 door. Well, what does that even mean? What kind of wood is this? So, shout out to Ron Rittner, my buddy who hates role-playing games and yet got the recommendation. I love it. Also, we had a super chat from great role-playing Debbie, who said, and don't do a castle spoiler from an AP and collapse the dungeon once you're done. Yeah, no, that's a good idea. In fact, for me, I would argue there is no done. I mean, it's a natural, it's for me, throw a, Baylor, or throw like a great worm dragon at the bottom of the dungeon. I mean, that's a classic thing, but there doesn't need to be a goal per se. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't things happening in the dungeon, and certainly the players are going to create, their own, problems. But I mean, for me, the biggest thing is just you got to let the players make the decisions, because that's another thing about Megadungeons that I love personally, and this is something that's come up. We've talked about this on the channel. Smith talks about this all the time. And this is a problem. This is like 3 problems that specific to Pathfinder 2. And Strat, I know we've talked about this a lot. Is if I'm making a standard adventure or I'm playing an AP or whatever, and I'm thinking about encounter balance, and I make an extreme encounter because I want the party to be challenged to the limits, I'm not giving them any say in whether or not they want to play against that encounter. They have to play against that encounter because that's the only way to move through the story. That's the only way to get to the next part of the story. It's a severe encounter. It's an extreme encounter. Maybe a person didn't show up tonight. Maybe everyone had a really tough week at work, okay? And they just want to get drunk or get blazed, and they just want to have fun. They don't feel like being top of their game. Don't forget to aid. If somebody misses an inspire courage, we're dead, right? They want to just be like, can I go someplace where my gunslinger can actually crit things? And let's just have like a good old time. And in a classic Mega Dungeon, you have all these options. Now, whether it's barrel maze and it's horizontal or it's vertical, if your group of level 5 PCs has been, we talked about this, Strat, you mentioned this before, this idea of inexhaustibility. You're never going to beat it. You're never going to clear it. So chances are good, you're level 5, you might be on dungeon level 5, but you kind of skipped level 2, and you never really got that deep into level 4, and you did most of level 3. And so it's tonight, you're all level 5 characters, everybody shows up, and the party goes, well, what are we gonna, and level 3 dungeon means this is a level 3 dungeon from a Pathfinder. It's made for party level 3. So the encounters on this dungeon are level, you might have you might have an extreme level 3. You might have a couple severe level 3s. You might have a couple moderate level 3s. The party goes, you know what? I don't want to go fight that crazy thing at the end of level 5. Let's go back to level 3. We almost finished it. Let's just go polish it off. We'll just clear things out. Everything will be crit failing. We'll just feel like gods amongst men. And yeah, the experience won't be that great, yada, yada. The treasure won't be that great. And so there's an incentive for us not to just do this every week, but sometimes it's fun to just kick ass and take names. On the other hand, if you and if your people show up, if your, maximum car op Munchkin player Veronica shows up, and then your other super car op group of Northern Reacher pros show up, and you're like, oh, we've got the elite crew here tonight who actually know how to play the game. There's not an alchemist, there's not an oracle in sight, right? Like it's all just fighters and sorcerers, right? Then you go, hey guys, you want to go down? We did find that stairway to level 7. You guys want to go to level 7? And be level 5 and fight some level 7 encounters and get some level 7 treasure. And by the way, treasure in Pathfinder 2 is exponential. So that's insane. And then you're like, yeah, let's do it. And then here's the thing, they wipe. But whose fault was it? It wasn't mine. It was yours. And the players know that. So forget everything. We're talking about the philosophy of this first part of the stream about Mega Dungeons. It's not about, for me, it's not about anything other than the logistics of what it does to play. And it allows the players maximum agency while not making the GM's job impossible. That's what it really comes down to for me.
There's also one other kind of important consideration when you are sitting down to do this thing. to run especially designing, you're a year away. If you're doing it this way, you're a year away from even starting to run it. But if you are going to run something like this, there are two approaches as a DM, ref, judge, GM, whatever you want to call yourself, looking at it. One is the very games kind of perspective where when the party says, all right, we've gotten as far as we're going to go, we're going back to town. You just go, okay, you go back to town. The other approach is a bit more like the Roach Motel, where if they came in and they went down to the 5th level, they have to play through every level to come back out. And it makes it very, very hard. More like a Forbidden Lands kind of a thing where you have to plan going, okay, we're planning on dipping down to level 5, grabbing that thing, because now we have the aforementioned scholar with us who's going to translate that door, and we're going to solve the puzzle, open the door, and go in. But we could be stuck down there for weeks. So we have to make sure we have enough stuff with us when we go down, because we know getting out is going to be that much harder. So that plays into also how you want to run the game. If you want the Megadungeon to take 12, 15 years to play, then you'll play it the latter way. If you want them to go back to the town, sell the stuff, and then you kind of abstract it and come back in and run it in 2 years, then you play the former one.
And I think that's an important point, because traditionally we think of Megadungeons, we think of the old school Renaissance, we think of torches and rations and people starving to death and getting killed by pits. That's cool. I like that. I mean, that's a lot of fun to me. But our modern day games, Pathfinder 2, 5th edition in particular, do not play that way. And guess what? That's okay. It's okay. You don't have to punish your players every step of the way. You don't. You could just let them play and let them have fun. And as long as it's a playground for you and your friends to get into all sorts of crazy hijinks and have great and amazing encounters and find cool treasure and, pull some stuff out of your ass and make some rulings, and things get messy and things get dirty. And, remember the time where we all dressed up as goblins so that we could sneak through that one area so that we could, as long as you're doing that, then you're doing it right.
This has all been very enlightening for me, because I was originally going into this thinking it has to be something that you do have to beat. But yeah, no, I like it a lot more now that it's just a place. It's not, okay, we're going in here to go and beat this dungeon.
Right.
I like that a lot.
Strat?
I will expand on something you said about this role, the players getting to choose. If you actually think about what that does, it solves so many problems that 5e and Pathfinder 1, Pathfinder 2 are struggling with. All of this entire thing about encounter balance and the GM having getting this entire every sense of having to fudge as a GM just evaporates completely if you run a mega dungeon or something, even just a normal dungeon with the principles of a mega dungeon attached. Right. Because it is now on the players, on what they do, what they choose. It's now not your fault anymore for screwing it over. It's theirs for hey, we went in there too boldly, we didn't get information, whatever. And
never estimate the self-inflicted damage that players can do to themselves. Let them, believe me, you don't have to do much. Just let them, feed them 1 or 2 hooks and let them do the rest. Believe me, they'll do enough damage to themselves where you don't have to worry.
On the note of old school dungeon things like the OSR and so on, you really don't have to do as Derek already said. I'm my home campaign is currently running something that is getting towards being a mega dungeon, but it's still too small. It's at the end it will have 200 rooms maximum, I think.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I'm not running this as an old school, you trip, you die. It's very much you have this open space full of NPCs to meet, stories to find, and interact with and mess with. It's a very new school thing that you can do with that just fine, just by changing what you put into the dungeon. Instead of putting random death traps or tracking of rations, you put in interesting people to meet, and suddenly you have a much more new school feeling to it. Also then throw out death and replace it with it's a narrative punishment instead, and everything clicks together.
Right, absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, we got a couple super chats here from Vin. He said, I still think it's cooler when there's a boss at the bottom. I'm not disagreeing. the bottom of my dungeon will always have usually like an ancient red worm, okay? Like it's always going to have something amazing and awesome. I completely agree with you. And even if that only becomes clear as you go deeper, or maybe it's even cooler that way, like I agree, it shouldn't be, this is the goal. Because the moment you go, hey, we're level 1, what's our goal? To get to the bottom and kill this level CR25 dragon. That is not what you want, because that is going to create that time pressure, that naggingness. And Vin tipped $2 just to finish up his point. He says, but I agree, there shouldn't be a time limit. Now, you can have things that have like local time limits, okay? Like, hey, we, killed the goblin tribes. We have a month before all of those bodies come back as ghouls and, to get into the dungeon. But like, that's not like the end. Avoid existential crises, right? Avoid, this is going to end the world. Avoid, if your alignment is good, you must go do this thing. Because the moment you put that on the players, you're taking from them all that agency that you had. And to the point about like what Strat was saying about this new school concept, we ran a Megadungeon in Pathfinder 1, which, has create water as a cantrip, create food, like light's a cantrip. Survival was not the name of the game. Right. It was exploring this place, learning its track. It had a personality unto its own. And then things that the players did had an impact. They went to level 2 and there was a gelatinous cube on level 2. And level 2 had this sort of like weird fountain that had psychic emanations that was actually put there by the original, not even the original, but one of the creators of the dungeon to magically compel people to be its servants in the sleep. And they killed all the servants, but they never wanted to fight the gelatinous cube because that was a little too high level for them when they were only level 2. So they left and they went on to the dungeon. And what I ruled is that the gelatinous cube gathered up all the psychic energy from everybody, and it became known as like the Omni Cube. And it became this hyper self-aware gelatinous cube with psychic abilities. And it was just, it was this insane thing. And they never went back. They never dealt with it. But because they were afraid of it. They were like, oh shit, Derek made it crazy and stupid and it's going to kill us. And they would, even when they were like level 10, they would like sneak through level 2 because they didn't want to, that was the domain of the Omni Cube. But yet they felt like that was theirs, right? They said, we did this, right? And I didn't plan for there to be an Omni Cube. It didn't matter if there was or if there wasn't. In fact, there was even a time, I think, when they were much higher level where they said, we should just go back and kill the Omni Cube, and someone said, nah, like he deserves it. Like you want to know why high level characters don't go just kill everything? Because they're like, you know what? Nah, leave it for somebody else to deal with. Like it's totally fine. But like there's a sort of a mercenary bent to the point there. But all I'm trying to say is you can have factions and you can have evolving storylines, but just do it off of what the players do. That's the key. That's the absolute key.
Definitely.
I'm just seeing if we got anything here. But yeah,
I would just like to add one other point to the final boss thing.
Okay.
Should your players actually make it someday to the bottom of this mega dungeon, it's also great to play up on, to your point earlier, how weird they've become in the process. The dungeon should ideally fundamentally change the characters just like it would change any other story would. And it might not change them to the point of like, it might not have these giant sweeping story arcs and beats and things like that. But maybe some of the items are intelligent and it's, they should be like babbling to themselves and really be weird by the time they get to the bottom because they have just experienced so much trauma getting down there. And I think that's where something like Lamentations of the Flame Princess does really, really, really well at showing how different you are. You're no longer, like you said, you're no longer a normal person. You're by all accounts probably some kind of like real psychopath by the time you get to the end of this. And really playing up on that and then having, instead of it being a villain at the bottom, almost like a frenemy, someone that has goals that now align almost with the goals of a super high-powered party of other weirdos to the point where they're like, oh, now we're starting entering in these shades of gray. Then you have that really nice central conflict where you can have something that can be memorable and fun and special instead of just going down to the bottom and trying to kill the thing.
So let me give you... Pumpkin, please.
I was just saying. So you're saying like the bins thing, like the characters are literally taking a piece of the dungeon with them when they leave and are done with it.
Yes.
It's just like.
So
I gotcha.
Yeah. So Ben stole my thunder. So my
Sorry.
no, it's fine. My single greatest tool to having Megadungeons be successful is what we call in our group fountains. Now they don't have to be fountains, but the idea of the fountain is from like old school role-playing games. Gary would have these in the DMG. You'd even see these in some very early modules or even some very early computer role-playing games. There'd be some magical fountain and you drink from it and you get some sort of magical random effect. Could be good, it should be good. It could be bad. That was classic back in the day, but for bad was sort of my thing. Here's the key. I love to put things into the Mega Dungeon, which allow players. Remember, I said that my Mega Dungeons are always something. So let's use what we were saying before. This Mega Dungeon is actually like the result of 5,000 years of various civilizations and forces all competing over maybe like the primal source of evil, right? The shard of evil that created evil in the multiverse is actually resting at the bottom of this dungeon, right? And this whole thing was this big, everything has been about either capturing it or fighting it or defending it or guarding it or whatever, utilizing it, exploiting it. So you have this sort of primal theme of evil. And the idea here would be that as you get lower and lower levels, right, the power of this evil would kind of grow up. But what I love to give my players is this opportunity, usually once or twice per level, to tap into that evil, or tap into that power. As a minor spoiler alert, I did this even in Abomination Vaults. I allowed my players at each level of the Abomination Vaults to drain the power of the Gauntlet and gain new occult, ghostly, ghastly abilities as they sort of drew upon the power that Belcora herself was using. And this does like three things. One, it makes them innately attached to the game, because what it means is even the biggest, most, car op, min-max, munchkin person goes, wait, so these things are like free bonus abilities, like outside of the scope of the game. Oh, I want that, right? Like I want to get that. That's amazing. So people want these. They're going to make their characters weird and strange and powerful. And it's a real motivation because it's something that you can't get anywhere else. But the other thing is, it kind of explains why they don't go and just destroy the world when it's done, because there's almost a sense of, like Ben was saying, frenemy, like by the time they get to the bottom, so much of this power that they have is the very thing that they're sort of trying to destroy. And in theory, if they succeed, so much of what they've gained, so much of their power is going to dissipate, right? And super minor spoiler alert, it's like the Ancient One from Doctor Strange movie, right? Where she was using the power of the evil people because she was like, that's the only way that I can keep us all safe, right? Is making that sort of exemption or exception to the rule. So I love putting these sort of elements into my dungeons, because players will go like, okay, it's a new level. We got to find, the chaos fountain. We got to find the strange arcane device that will empower us and just get us, keep going and keep going and keep going. And then when they get to the bottom, there's almost this sort of like, damn, like, do we want to really destroy this? I guess we do, but and so like we never got to the end of it, but by the end of Abomination Vaults, the players would be like, damn, man, we kind of don't want this Gauntlet to be destroyed because it's kind of sick. And so I think that is a fantastic design tool for just keeping the game interesting and keeping players invested, because all these things, dungeons or whatever, they are just a medium for you and your friends to get around and have fun moments with each other. That's all they are. I just really, really like players to have the agency. I like the players to be the ones saying, like when I'm running a great dungeon campaign, like my players sit down, they've discussed this via email or Discord during the week, and they sit down and immediately go, yeah, we're going to level 4 today. We want to check out those vaults that we found, but we didn't have the right spells, but now we do, and we're ready to go, explore those. As a side note, if you think sorcerers are overpowered in Pathfinder 2 or preparation is weak in Pathfinder 2, play a Mega Dungeon campaign and your feelings on that might change because being able to prepare spells, knowing, hey, we'll come back and we'll deal with this later. You can't really do that in an adventure path. You can't like, oh, well, the cultists are attacking now. You got to deal with this right now. Like the town's under attack, or, you know, you're assaulting the giant fortress right now today. You're like, I got the wrong spells. I'm going to go back to town and rest. Also, not to mention the fact that you're like, man, this is really awkward because, man, these monsters would just destroy the town. Like, I guess they do nothing. I don't know. Right? Megadungeon, it's been there for 10,000 years. Nothing's going to happen tomorrow. Okay? You're good. You're good.
Unless the players destabilize the situation.
Absolutely.
Which is also amazing.
Yeah, if the players do it, fuck them. Like that's where you're, you know, if they open up that Pandora's box, you know, let them reap the whirlwind, right? But yeah, I think that from a game design perspective, it's fantastic. So that's kind of the, you know, philosophy of it. But what is Dungeon 23 and what does that mean for you? You know, what does that mean for us? So again, Sean McCoy says, hey, why don't we just do a dungeon every day and make a room every day? And I thought it seemed like a pretty cool idea. Ben thought it was like a pretty cool idea. And I think I would encourage you to try it as well. Now, one thing that's really important, and I want to highlight this, Sean McCoy himself, you know, in case you want it to be official, said, look, this does not need to, you don't need to design a 120 XP encounter every day. Literally, you could just draw a doodle on a piece of paper and then write into it, giant snake asleep around altar with massive ruby. Okay, that's it. That's your room for the day, right? Awesome. Immediately, you're like, well, that's pretty sweet. I don't know. Like, we could fight the snake. We could kill it. We could try to sneak past the snake and get the ruby. Is the ruby cursed? Does the ruby do anything? Or you know what? Fuck that room. Fuck that snake. Fuck that ruby. Let's just go somewhere else. Yeah, Strat.
That's also a great situation to like employ a classic Mega Dungeon thing of like this way too strong creature in there. Like, hey, just make that thing 240 XP. It's on them. Yeah,
exactly. And you know what? Sometimes that's fun because one of the fun things, anybody who plays video games will tell you this, like one of the fun things about video games is where you're like, oh, this thing's too tough for me. And then you come back later on and you just go, you know, you just completely roll over it. Like, we talk about this all the time. Like, there's not really an opportunity in APs. Okay, how do I say this? Like, this is more Pathfinder 2 specific, but I think it's 5th edition perspective as well. It's what is the point of the low encounter? Right? The trivial or the low, or dare I even say the moderate, because we know that it's not really going to risk the characters' lives, but it's also going to take a lot of time. But if you're forcing the player to have to go through that encounter, what are we doing here? But if the players deliberately said, remember that snake we were so afraid of? I bet you we could like one-shot that thing. You're like, you know what? Let's just take a quick detour. And you're like, well, technically this is just a trivial encounter. And you're like, I don't care, dude. I'm the one who wanted to be here. He bet me 1,000 gold that I can't one-shot kill this thing, okay? So I'm going to cast True Strike, and I'm going to try to one-shot kill this thing, and we'll see what happens, right? So that's where I think it's important. Yeah, Pumpkin.
I'll say that, yeah, hearing all this, it sounds like, as a PF2 player, it fixes a lot of PF2's issues. And, you know, it's probably just because this game was designed to play a dungeon.
It fixes a lot of D20 issues for that reason. And it's because, and Pumpkin, I know you've been getting into, you know, some of the story-based games, you know, that I love. And you read those games, you go, wow, these games have a lot of rules and mechanics and operative fixtures for moving and advancing plots. And for, you know, failure shouldn't stop your plot. Okay? But guess what? In a mega dungeon, failure can totally stop everything from happening because there's no plot. It doesn't matter. It's like, oh, but how are we going to get through the door? Get good, son. I don't know what to tell you. Right? Like, come back with a battering ram, burn it down with oil, level up and get a lockpicks, find the key. It doesn't matter. You don't have to get through that door. There's no journal or ledger that you need to read so that you can go to the next place in the adventure.
And suddenly you can actually start playing the game. like you're not just listening to the GM story of like, well, we have to get through there, so like just keep rolling dice. No, like you're stuck at that door, you want to go through that, well, go get clever. Or get powerful. And if not, there's 100 other doors you can still go to, so the game doesn't grind to a halt.
I don't want. Yeah,
I'm
Pumpkin,
sure,
please.
I'm sure this is obvious to all you old school gamers, but to me, this is like big light bulb moment. Like, oh, this is how you're supposed to play D20.
And Strat said something really important. And by the way, listen, I don't think I'm some weird old school grog nerd. Combat is war. Everything should like. I'm totally fine with players going like, "Wow, that was a really creative solution, guys." That you get through that. But I'm also fine with people going, I'm just going to level up and get stronger and then just come back and just destroy this thing because I outmath it. Like that is part of the D20 system as well. It's not like if you go back to the original D&D, character saving throws got better. The fighter's THAC0 dropped every level, right? Like they could eventually get to the point where they could just, destroy everything. So Vin has a $2 super chat. He said, are the mega dungeons being collected anywhere? Self-confessed cynic, I think right now it is completely like just, out there in the ether sphere. I think some people, the original challenge was to do it in some sort of notebook, but I don't think you could do that. Ben's going to do his on a big roll of paper. People are doing theirs digitally. I don't think there's a formal place. Hashtag Dungeon23 is what I've seen. But I know that on our Discord server, I've just created a new forum tag where people can go and create maybe a forum post for your dungeon, and then each day you can put your new post to it. But to kind of make sure there's some confusion in chat. So Dungeon 23 is the idea of 2023 is dungeon a day, a dungeon a day dungeon. A mega dungeon is a big, sprawling, massive, labyrinthine work. And the idea is every day, you're not playing a campaign with this. You're not, you're not worried about, staying ahead of your players. Every day, you're just going to add another room to your dungeon, another chamber, another series of corridors. And you're going to put something, and I would encourage you to do this because I think the greatest sin of mega dungeons is empty rooms, is put something in there interesting. And when I say interesting, I mean it could obviously be an encounter, a trap, a monster, but it's also something that as you begin to build your dungeon, you are going to start to tell stories with your dungeon. Okay. So for example, and again, this isn't part of when I say story, I do not mean what you're thinking. I don't mean, book, novel, AP adventure. I just mean, hey, guess what? There used to be dwarves here. That's all. There used to be dwarves here. Maybe we'll figure out why they were here later on. Here is a chamber, okay, that tells a little bit about the dwarven history. And ideally, maybe it gives them a clue so that later on, when they find the dwarven, this is the classic thing where it's like there's 3 dwarven figures on the wall, and the one on the right is holding up a great gem. And then later on in the dungeon, there's a room where there are 3 slots on the wall, and you have found the gem. And you go, which slot do we put it in? Well, if people were paying attention 27 weeks ago, they'll know. And by the way, and if that moment does happen, and I hope it does for you, your players will feel like the biggest badasses of all time. Of all time.
And by doing all of that, you actually you're rewarding your players for actually caring about your game, remembering things, making notes, writing it down, because it actually becomes helpful for them. And once you start doing that, you will find that people are going to be much, much more into it. Or
Yeah, it's not too far divorced from an investigative game. It's not exactly the same, but you can reward some of those same behaviors that you would in a straight investigative game. I don't think you'd want it to be too reliant on that, but knowing that the kobolds in section 1, wear a certain badge, and kobolds in section 2 are a different kind of badge, to know that, oh, wait a minute, maybe they are not in cahoots with each other. Maybe we can play them against each other and just do an end run around the whole thing. That type of thinking, even if it's not what you had in mind, just say yes, reward it, get on with it.
And then a mega dungeon comes into play again. Like if they don't figure that out, if they don't do that, maybe they do something else. Who cares?
It doesn't matter.
There's
Right.
Yep.
You don't have to get through that. We got another super chat from Vin. He said, "Let's upgrade D23 from a tag just to a whole forum." That's not a bad idea.
It's not a bad idea.
Yeah, I actually like that idea, Vin. Well, I think we'll probably do that.
Vin finally had a good idea.
But yeah, I mean, there are some things that I can't even begin to like describe to you. It's like we had one guy in our campaign. Now this campaign lasted over 2.5, 3 years, 20 levels of dungeon. Some of these levels had 50, 60 rooms per level. And he was the mapper for most of it. But one of the caveats of this dungeon was, if you wanted to go anywhere, there was no fast travel. Okay. Like I would make you describe, even if it was like anything that you would even encounter here would flee before you. I would make them, describe. And it got to the point where like they'd be going to level 13. And I would, it was almost like a thing where it's like Zach, and he'd be like, no map. And he would be like, we go down the stairs, we take a left, we go 60 feet down the corridor, we take a right through the secret door, we step through there. Somebody casts daylight spell, which turns the mural into a portal. We step through the portal, which takes us to level 3. It's like when you see somebody speed run Mario, and they go to warp 3, they get the warp whistle, they blow the whistle, they go to warp 4, they get the other whistle, they blow, you're like, wow, this person has mastered this game. And not like because they picked the best feat, like they own this game. They know this dungeon. They know this place. And I'm not there are cons to the dungeon model. Don't get me wrong. But one of the great regrets I always have in, I talk about this with rule of 3 with monsters. Players fight a really weird, crazy monster. And they're like, oh my God, this thing's totally weird and crazy. And you're making recall knowledge checks and you're figuring it out. And it's kind of kicking your ass and then you beat it. And in most games, certainly most Adventure Pass, you will never fight that monster again. And so it's like the knowledge that you earn, that you paid in blood for, kind of gets lost. Well, it's the same thing with dungeons, right? You go play Rise of Rune Lords, you go to Thistle Point or Thorn, whatever it's called, Thorn Keep, and then you go to the Thistletop, thank you. And, and you're like, oh, cool, we learned Thistletop. And you're like, yeah, well, you'll never be back there. You're gone. Like it's just whatever. Oh, it's cool. We know now that room connects over. It doesn't matter. Like it was done. You're on to the next thing. You're on to the next thing. You're on to the next thing. And by the time you get 5 or 6 adventures in, you've been through 8 or 9 dungeons and they're all meaningless to you because you're never going to go back to them, which means you don't pay attention because why? Like the only thing I know that I have to do here is, did we kill the boss and move to the next stage of the adventure? Because that's the only thing that really needs to happen until we eventually get to the end and kill the guy or kill the girl. And then the adventure's over.
And then you just do left-hand rule until you've cleared it all and whatever.
Another super chat from Vin. Vin getting things. He said, another fun idea. If you forget, can't do a room for a day, you can sub in with someone else's room. So everyone is actually, in a way, paying forward. That's not a bad idea. Maybe work with a partner. That way you can bounce ideas.
That's a better idea than just borrowing someone else's room. That kind of kills the idea is so that you get in the habit of creating new spaces, right? It's not to the end thing is, if you end up with a mega dungeon at the end, that's terrific. But the idea is to develop good design habits and get better, more meaningful and faster type of results. If you're borrowing stuff, literally, that's like borrowing someone's answer for a test. It's the point isn't to have 365 rooms at the end. The point is to have a cohesive idea, I think, is the real.
Absolutely.
And that's why this is a good idea for me. Sorry for cutting you off.
No,
Derek.
please. I cut people off all the time.
This will be I'm doing this. I'm going to do the dungeon 23. This will be the first dungeon I've ever built. So I think this will be a good exercise and a good learning experience for me. So
that said, yes, of course, don't just grab entire rooms from somebody else doing this challenge. That's the point. But to populate a dungeon, especially this big, you're going to have to look everywhere for ideas.
Oh yeah.
You have nobody can build a mega dungeon without stealing a million things. Yep. That's one good
plan on getting
resource
some inspiration from Perilous Wilds here, and maybe some other random generators that Ben, I'm sure, could recommend.
Various OSR blocks also have slush pile posts and similar things that are just big idea piles for things to steal that are like specifically posted as like just concepts to work out. Those are great for populating a dungeon.
Yeah, or even for yourself, or you keep a running list of things, because remember,
it might not be a good idea now, but
yeah, exactly. And the idea of later things you'll start to see how it fits together. Like someone had posted earlier about like, does this mean people have to wait a year to play? Essentially, they might, if you plan on running it, just because in the beginning you might be 6 months in, and then you have this one random room that ties together, the whole thing. Now I see where this concept. Now I actually have the theme going on. The idea, like we had talked about before, and we'll get into this, I'm sure, when we get to like the nuts and bolts, the idea of do you start with a theme or not? That's where that kind of comes into play. I think we also talk about what we have in mind for because I know we all have very different ideas of what we want to do. Like Jesse, who is not here, I don't think, but in the Discord, he had said he's going to be doing it strictly overland, where instead of doing a room, he's doing one hex. And I mean, that's going to be massive at the end. Right. There's going to be many, many interesting. It might be a little. I think that would be a very active area to go through. Every hex has an encounter.
I mean, to be fair, a hex is like 25 or 30 square miles. That is an unbelievably huge amount of space. So I think that's totally fine. Real quick, we had a super chat from Great Role Playing Debbie, who said, "Love a good soft story." I'm not exactly sure what soft story means, but I think what Debbie means is just the idea. She did. Okay. Well, the idea of a soft story is a story that isn't super involved. Stuff is happening around you and you can discover it at your own pace. Absolutely. Like that's a fantastic idea, because what I was going to say too with those ideas, you're like, oh, I have this amazing idea for like a room full of gargoyles, but I'm designing room number 6. Okay. Well, we're not there yet, but cool. Jot it down, put it somewhere. Cool. Now you have an idea for October. Right, like, or whatever, or like September, and maybe by the time you get there, plus when you have that idea, now you can start thinking, oh, how do I link something back? The other thing about Megadungeons is, I find as a DM, like, I feel bad if I make something that I know, how do I say this, doesn't have a solution, right? Because it's like, especially if the players like have to go through this. So like, as an example, there was a door. And they eventually discovered this. There was these doors in the dungeon that we ran in Pathfinder 1, this big mega dungeon. They were called blue steel doors. They were these essentially they were like elevator doors. Like, and they were on there were some of them on the first level. Now they're very rare, but they never learned anything about them except for, eventually they learned that they were called blue steel doors. Much later in the dungeon, they found a scrap of paper, and it said something about passages and opens. And at the bottom, it said Decitem. And it was underlined. And that's it. It didn't say, this is what opens the... It just said Decitem. And the group was like, what does that even mean? And I was like, I am not going to tell them what this does. I don't have to. It doesn't matter that they went through that door. But eventually, they were just like, what if this is a password for something? Like, I don't know, go say it to that door. And they said it to the door, and it opened. And it was just like, holy shit, that's amazing. It made it feel like I had planned this big, huge thing. I had not, right? I had made a door on level 1 that could not be opened. Full stop. I had no way to open it, right? Like I wasn't thinking 10 steps ahead. I wasn't like, Magnus Carlsen them. I was just like, it's something, I don't know how you deal with it, but whatever. I'll come up with it later. The mega dungeon, I'm not saying it's like a quantum mega dungeon. I do think that there's a value to prepping it and having it be real. Again, I said the biggest thing that can make a mega dungeon go south is when a group of players feels like I am just walking through the monster manual, right? Like I am just fighting monsters and getting treasure and leveling up, and that's it. There's no exploration element. The mega dungeon, right, the 3 pillars of play, right? The mega dungeon takes that exploration element and it just gives it nitro boosters. It pushes it almost to the forefront.
And like also in a PF1 game, there's no such thing as an impassable object. Once if your players get to level 15, they have a million tools to do everything.
Exactly.
So you don't have to level solution.
Greg tipped $25.
Such a good point.
Any Temple of Elemental Evil pushed me to the limit of being able to keep the game fresh and exciting as you hit your 90th room. It's terrifying to me to DM another Megadungeon,
Can't
but
see
I
what the
love
comment
reading them in
says.
the
Yeah.
design challenge.
I'll read it back, but Greg basically said that playing first edition Temple of Elemental Evil really pushed him to the limit of what he could handle in terms of a mega dungeon, because just the sheer size and scope, and just how basically how much there is to deal with. And
I do a whole stream just talking about the strengths and weaknesses and problems.
Absolutely.
Of Elemental Evil.
Yeah, and again, thank you for the very generous tip. But I think the key here is just taking a step back and sort of leaning into what Strat has been saying, where you're not under any obligation to do anything. Because even Temple of Elemental Evil has a little bit of like you got to stop Therazden, like there's that kind of evil element to it. And the 90th room, as you mentioned, I agree. If this is why for me, I like to ratchet things up. I'm not saying Terrescue bone fails, but I am saying I am saying that like if you fuck up your dungeon on level 1, you're throwing away a year or more, 2 years of play. If you throw out something like an actual 6-shooter on level 18 of your dungeon, all right, you're not ruining as much, but it keeps the game fresh. And as the party gets higher level and you throw weirder and stranger stuff at them, the challenges get more difficult. Because I loved what Strat said. Characters are very resilient. You don't have to think, how are they going to get their way out of this one? I don't know, but they will. They're high level characters in Pathfinder 2, or even medium level characters in Pathfinder 2. They have so much power and resilience, and they have the ability to just come up with weird solutions. Just keep an open heart, an open mind, and ultimately, you're going to find that they're going to come up with creative solutions to problems that you never even envisioned.
That's probably true in any D20 game.
Yes.
But even in PF2, I ran a game, and I'm like, I don't know how the players are going to deal with it, but here's the Tarrasque. You guys fight the Tarrasque. Tell me, you figure it out. I don't know how you're going to beat it. And they did. They beat the fucking Tarrasque, and it was easy.
I remember...
they wiped it easily.
I remember there was this it was like a sentry beholder. So it was like an eye stalk, single big eye, and it was like rooted into the ground, and it could fire a disintegrate ray. And it was like, like those things from like Legend of Zelda, like that spin around.
Mm-hmm.
It was like one of those. And they were on level 3.
Beam eyes or whatever.
And they were on level 3. Yeah, the beam eye things. And they're on level 3. And one of the characters, they had found Nolzur's magical pigments, right? The things that you can paint. And so what they did, they had to cross this hallway. And so one of the characters had like a really good like performance check or something like that. And they're like, Derek, can I paint using the pigments in the air like a photorealistic painting of what the empty corridor looks like? So like they painted, so it looked like a photo, like the corridor was still empty. And that way the whole party could just cross across the corridor, and the thing would turn and look, and it would just see this completely photorealistic painting. And it was like, oh, okay, what was that noise? And it looks down the hallway, and I was like, okay, well, it sees your painting, but it's really good, and you made it with Nolzur's magic pigments, so it thinks the hallway is just empty, and the party was
great.
And the party's
the old taking the photo, put it in front of the security camera.
That is the D&D equivalent of taking a picture of the room and putting it in front of the security camera, and they see that the room is just fine, or that the video footage is looping. They did that in D&D. That was a Smith move, by the way.
I love it.
And here's the thing, like look at the crazy, wonky, wacky items in your game book. They're insane. Right? Like you go, what is this even in the game for? It's in the game for things like this, because going back to what both of you have said, you start looking at D&D like this, or you start looking at Pathfinder like this, you're like, wow, a lot of this stuff makes a lot more sense suddenly, because wow, this stuff is everywhere in the game, Self-confessed cynic with another super chat. Is 4E good for dungeon crawling? How about Legend of the Five Rings, XD? So it's funny that you say that, Vin. I want to say something real quick. We are trying to discuss for the Knights of Last Call. We have our personal Friday home game, and we're trying to figure out what game we're going to play next. And we're having a little bit of difficulty with it. And I joked about Legend of the Five Rings and being like a dungeon campaign. And then someone's like, oh, and I was like, well, actually, when the dark god fell from heaven, he landed and created this pit all the way from the real world to hell. And I was like, in a very, very Vin-esque moment, I'm imagining a group of samurai who have to fight their way down the pit. And you can imagine the pit is just like a series of dungeons. And they're just like fighting their way down to the bottom, at bottom of which, of course, in hell, you fight the dark god and, you kill him. And that would be your campaign. So yes, that would be what I would do for Legends of Five Rings. For 4E.
Sounds like an L5R Big Trouble in Little China crossover.
Correct. Can 4th edition be good for dungeon crawling? Absolutely, because it has all of the mechanics that exist in your standard D20 game. It has skill checks. You have magical items, resources, rituals that you can use in order to produce magical effects. The only difference is 4th edition has a little bit more of a robust combat system, same with Pathfinder 2, which means that combats are going to take longer. Combats in Pathfinder 2, combats in 4th edition, in my opinion, take longer than they do in, say, 3rd edition, which take longer than they do in 2nd edition, which take longer than they do in basic. That is kind of the nature of the game. And that is the way it goes.
One of the biggest things is that the rituals mean everyone has access to wacky shenanigans.
You mean in 4th edition?
Yeah, in 4th edition.
Absolutely, yeah. Because anybody can take that feat. Wizards get Ritual Caster for feat as like a free bonus feat, the way that fighters and druids get shield block in Pathfinder 2. Wizards get Ritual Caster, but anybody can take it. It's just a feat. It's just a general feat. And then once you have Ritual Caster, you could learn Pass Wall. You could learn Affect Normal Fires. You could learn Phantasmal Image or what have you.
All the great things for messing with a dungeon that don't help you in combat.
Correct.
So I'll say I don't know if I'm just biased because I've seen a lot of really good players. Maybe it's not all players, but players I've seen, they know what characters can do better than the GM does, I think. So they're gonna figure out a way. They're gonna know, oh hey, we can do this and this and this, and like, oh, I hadn't even thought of that or didn't even know that. But they did.
That should be the case. That should be the case in every game you ever run, hopefully.
For sure. So it's not like you're not trying to sign this. Oh, I'm going to really stomp my players. I'm going to make them. They're not going to know what to do this time. You're making something and like they're probably going to. I have no idea what they're going to do, but I'm sure they have something. And even if they don't, oh well.
Well, and that's the other thing. It removes that responsibility from you to even know what it is that they're supposed to do. Because to a certain extent, if I make an encounter that the party has to go through in order to get to the next phase of the AP, but I make that encounter very difficult, or I make that encounter very difficult to solve, and I don't give the players any sort of tools or ability to, I'm sabotaging my own game, right? Like it in a dungeon, it's self-correcting, because if the party's really strong, then they're going to go down to a harder level and they're going to fight harder creatures, and that's it, problem solved. Or they'll stay here and they'll just raffle stomp easy creatures, but they're not being forced to do that, right? It's just something that, they chose to do.
And like, even if you completely mess up and one of your levels of your dungeon is like full of, I don't know, these like CR2 creatures from 5e that insta-gib you, or like something ridiculous and the entire level is just hell, whatever. The players will learn that and skip the level.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're not going to get into like design here, but like, let's say I was designing a Megadungeon. Let's say it was for Pathfinder 2. One of the things I like to do when I design Megadungeons is I like for levels to have different themed areas or even themes of a level. Probably like there's sort of broad themes for a level, and then there's sort of specific themes for an area. So let's say there's an area. Let's just pick some random levels, like level 6, right? Characters are around level 6, 7, something in that neighborhood, 7 or 8. And I make this area, and maybe you learn from rumors or from writings or from inscriptions, but there's an area of the dungeon. Maybe it's like the northeastern corner, and it's called like the Argent Vaults. Okay, the silver vaults, the Argent Vaults. And what it is it's a group of incorporeal undead, all incorporeal, which also need silver weapons, which means the only thing that can hit them effectively is silver ghost touch weapons or force. That's it. And there's like a whole region of them, like maybe 4 or 5 or 6 different encounters with various creatures that all have, incorporeal 15 resistance all, unless you have silver ghost touch. You could never put that into a game because who the hell is going to have silver ghost touch, let alone for multiple things? But this is a situation where your players will literally go, well, we want to get the treasure that's in the silver Argent Vault. We're going to go buy silver weapons and we're going to go put ghost touch runes on them or oils or something specifically to go deal with this area. And if the party encounters it randomly without any pre-knowledge somehow, and they're like, holy shit, everything here is tough and we can't possibly beat it. Instead of looking at you as the dungeon master and saying, you're being a dick for making these, oh, what are you trying to do? Beat the party? And you go, no, like you don't have to beat these things. Leave, come back another time. I admit, if you have a group of people or party members who are used to just killing everything and never being challenged, like that can, you might need an educational period. But for the most part, this lets the GMs kind of design whatever the hell they want and get away with it.
That actually also leads to a very important thing. You're going to need a session 0 that like talks about all these things. Yeah. Like you really need it for this because it's a completely different expectation of play from an AP. Like if you come from an AP group, of course. If you come from OSR, like whatever.
Yeah. I really like what DM Gary said here in the chat. He said, I really like the idea that coming up with a solution is arrogant because you are outnumbered as a DM. If you make the one only way, if you make the only way, you were basically saying the perfect solution that 6 players, couldn't possibly come up with on their own, right?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. The players are going to think of a better solution than you ever could, I think.
Absolutely. And again, like, why are we, like, we're talking about a game that has spells like Pass Wall in it. Like, what are we doing here? Like, I remember one time, okay, another story. I had made a vault and basically it was a vault, but it was locked from the inside. And I don't exactly remember what happens. All I know is that the rogue ended up casting a clairvoyant spell and like a telekinesis spell or like a ghost and like a mage hand spell. And I ended up letting him pick the lock from the inside of the vault, like almost like remote surgery, And everyone was like, that was awesome. Right. And yeah, I bent like half a dozen rules for it, but that's okay. Like, that's okay. It's okay. You're not cheating anybody out of anything except for a bad time. That's what you're stealing from them. You're stealing a bad time from them and you're giving them a good one.
And at the end of the day, that's what you want anyway, right? You want people thinking creatively and getting engaged in the game. That's what you want for a role-playing game.
The fourth pillar.
Right, the fourth pillar. We got another super chat. I heard Ben had some diagrams. Ben definitely gave us some stuff here. I'm going to switch over to a different view really quick. We can talk about some of this here. Hopefully this doesn't crash everything. So for starters, here's a picture of probably the OG of OG Megadungeons. This is the ruins of Undermountain, the original ruins of Undermountain, which by the way did suffer from a major problem, which is that a lot of these rooms were empty. Again, I'm not a big fan of empty rooms in Megadungeons. I mean, having them be occasional, but like if you have a lot of empty rooms in your dungeon, it's going to get real boring really fast.
So I will say that if you have a lot of empty rooms, that gives you maneuvering space. So if you're doing a combat as war thing,
sure,
you kind of want that.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I'm a big believer that a combat especially in a Megadungeon, doesn't have to be confined to just one room. It could be thought of as a series of interconnecting rooms. And I understand what a lot of people are saying. Oh, empty rooms were part of dungeons. It was always part. I agree. Yes, it is. But the same way that we've learned that Monopoly is a horrible game and shouldn't be played, we've also learned that, you don't necessarily need this all this repetitive, boring space.
Yeah, there's also a big difference between an empty room and an uninteresting room.
Yes.
You have tables with dressings for a reason. There's a reason why in the first edition DMG, it's right there. What's inside this room? You roll. Is there a monster in here? No, but there's always something in there that is interesting. Empty doesn't mean, it's another room with nothing on the walls. The floor's like the floor you saw before. That's
right.
Just boring.
So, and a safe room doesn't have to be empty. Like there could be friendly NPCs. It's not an empty room, but it's still a safe room that you can rest in.
Yeah, I would say the safe rooms are probably the most interesting because that's a chance. Maybe there's a totem or something carved in the wall that scares or prevents
Yeah.
creatures from coming in there. Like, here's a chance for you to inject that.
Yep.
What we were talking before about the soft story is a chance for you to inject that in there a little bit, like, and give them a feel like, oh, there's something going on here that's outside of what we actually can see or know.
Absolutely. And again, I think you made a great, Ben, that was a great quote where he said there's a difference between something being empty and something being, not interesting. And I've, when you say it's a room, what's in it? Dust. Any footprints? No. Right. And here's the biggest problem. Players are never going to stop asking questions. Okay. And the more empty a room is, the more they're going to ask questions. Then they're going to say, is there an illusion? I cast detect magic. What do you mean it's empty? What about the ceiling? Right. They are going to spend a completely inordinate amount of time on what is essentially this completely empty room. I don't like that. I think a room should always be interesting. I think they should be very rare that a room is empty. In my personal opinion, the only thing that should qualify for an empty room is if you've watched our Night School series, I talked about what I called Nexus rooms. And these are rooms where what's interesting about them is that there are 4 corridors going off of it, right? This is like a hub, a transportation hub. What's interesting about this room is now you have access to go west, east, and north, and like a lot of different options. That is, and you're like, and there's some, cool things on the wall that make it look like there's, I don't know, dwarven runes. But what's interesting about this room is, how it expands. If it's just like a closed off room and it's just empty, like put something in there. Ideally, put something in there. Okay, when you're designing your dungeon, when you're doing your dungeon 23 and you're on, like, for example, let's say you're going, your room 52, room 53, room 54, room 55, room 56, and then room 57, you put a Medusa. Go back to room 52, put a statue of a hobgoblin. And maybe that's the only thing that's in that room. There's no trap, there's no encounter. You go in there, you say, you find the remains of a long dead campfire burned out ages ago, and 5 hobgoblins, perfectly stone statues, still in the act of like sharpening their swords or preparing a meal, all perfectly stone. Boom. That's it. That's what's in that room. Technically, that's not an encounter, but it does so much for your game.
One very important thing it also does, it's a landmark. Like you need, like an actual empty room is horrible. You need something in there so that it has a name, so that players can refer to it. So you can like do a speed run thing of like
exactly
the place with the hobgoblin.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, exactly. We go to the dragon statue room. Okay, at the dragon statue room we go left. Exactly. These waypoints, these hallmarks. Such a good example. And by the way, while I have this up, so the dungeon that I ran for 3 years, this was level 1 of that dungeon. And obviously not as big as Undermountain, but God help you if you ever play through Undermountain. And self-confessed cynic says, I just don't think I'm built for this. It's part of it is just accepting that you are not going to, when we played Dragon's Delve, it was 20 levels plus some sub levels. There were entire levels of the dungeon that the group literally never even saw. They skipped over them. They found magic teleporters. They found secret back stairways. They just moved on. You're just not going to do it all. You're just not going to see it all. And that's
kind of the beauty of it, right? Because it's that you're making it your experience. So we went through the dungeon. We did it this way. We went into this room and we didn't go this way. This is it's all player agency. The players chose how to do the dungeon.
Exactly.
And if you're running multiple groups through the same dungeon in like a West March type of thing, or if you just have multiple campaigns and you're doing it very old school, then that is a great thing to have, because then you have different groups that might have totally different experiences, even though they know the other group is playing through. And especially if those resources are being taken up in real time as the group switch back and forth, it could make a really cool dynamic. You need to have multiple groups though to do that.
I mean, that is an awesome and incredible way to play. And it's something that I would love to see our Discord do via Northern Reaches, and doing something, or even just someone on their own as a community game saying, hey, I'm building this mega dungeon. I'm going to take up to 15 any players who want to come. You just got to schedule time with me. But if you go into the dungeon, if you go later in the week, that awesome treasure vault that you thought you were going to, raid and loot is gone. But we were talking about ways that you might get inspired and helped, and I believe this is Perilous Depths or Perilous Wilds, Ben, that you have me pull up here. There are a ton of resources out there on the net for random inspiration. You know that I'm a big fan of Tome of Adventure Design. This is another great one. Ben kind of sent this over to me from his PDF. So Ben, why don't you talk about how you might use this?
Okay, so first I will say that I am not going to be making a fantasy dungeon for Dungeon 23. I am going to be making one of those circular classic old school space stations that you see from old sci-fi movies for Mothership. So I'll be using slightly different resources than what's here. But the idea of something like this is that when we're talking about theme, that's where a table like this comes in. Where the other thing is how to host a dungeon is another great resource. How to host a dungeon tells you your history going back 10,000 years, 8,000, 5,000, and you literally build that backstory before you draw anything, so you kind of have an idea of what you're going for if you want to go theme.
Oh, that's a great. I completely forgot about how to host a dungeon. Is that by Tony Dowler?
I don't remember, but it's wacky. For sure. It's wacky, but it's got a lot of great ideas, and there's like 10 variations. So first you figure out what was the cataclysm and what brought it about, and then what are the things that made it happen. So that's the one side of it. Sorry, hang on.
So the book currently on screen is called Perilous Wilds. It is a book by Lampstone and Black. Is that who it's called?
I don't remember. It's for Dungeon World, but
it's technically for Dungeon World, but
for anything, I would say that is one. Maze Rats is another one that should be on your must-have list. Tome of Adventure Design, of course, is great for themes. And then the other two books, the GM Miscellany of Dungeon Dressing, like when you're getting into the nuts and bolts of it, just knowing what a room looks like and how it's different can help tie in themes, like totally, especially if they're different areas made by different people.
Yeah.
And you have the feel different. You can use books like that to help you kind of grind out those details.
I'm a big believer in theme, not just for I like to have my general way I work with it is my whole dungeon will kind of have a theme, and that is like on a gradient. So remember what I said before, if we had the primal source of evil, which is buried at the depths of the dungeon, then, at level 20, everything's infernal, right? Or everything is super chaotic and evil and destroy the world. That gradient fades off as you get higher up, right? And there's only hints of it or touches of it on level 1, and it gets deeper as you get it gets stronger as you go deeper. But within a dungeon level, I like for there to be areas or sub areas or level based themes that really help you not only tie the dungeon together, but make that level stand out. Like, hey, remember I said before, here's level 10. And what happened to level 10? Some crazy druid lich turned it into their personal underground garden with an artificial dark sun. And here's a place to use all sorts of crazy plant monsters that you would normally never get to use. How do I get the maximum value out of my bestiary, right? Here's a time to use all those stupid fae and stupid thing. I'll make them evil, and then we'll have them fight the party, right? And that's a great way to use it. But if your dungeon just feels like here's another random collection of monsters, it's going to get boring, I think.
One thing I've been doing with my dungeon is each region has its own game mechanics, just entire new rules added to this part. Very simple example, I've got one part in the dungeon where the enemies lay traps and there's darkness that matters. It's this sort of old school style part of the dungeon. There's horrible things there. You have to be careful. You have to carefully move. And in another part, there's a spider that wanders around. It's level 7. The region is level 1. Go play around in that spider space. Or level 9. I don't know the exact number anymore. Yeah. It's ridiculously high compared to what the players were.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a fantastic idea. I mean, I remember Aaron built a dungeon, Smith from Discord. He made a dungeon that we played through, and there was a region of a level of the dungeon that we were really excited to go into, and we discovered that any amount of light at all would summon like 1d4 shadows a turn.
Mm-hmm.
And so the only way to go through that level was either dark vision or blind. And it's like, well, okay, I'm not a dwarf, or I don't have, and back this 3rd edition, even elves didn't have dark vision, right? Only dwarves had dark vision. You're like, okay, I guess we got to come back here later when we have access to magic or magical items that will give us the ability to cast dark vision. It's, he's not screwing us out of anything. He's just saying, here is an area that needs to be happen. Like that is really fun and really compelling. Kind of a side note, Bob was able to do something in Northern Reaches that you can't even really get away with this in your standard D&D campaign. He made a part of his dungeon where you literally had to have 4 dwarfs. And like normally when you're playing with your party, you're like, well, what are you guys going to do? Re-roll characters? Like, no, but because Northern Reaches had, 176 PCs to choose from, they were like, okay, we can't get this today, but let's go back, find people with dwarven PCs, bring them back to the dungeon, and then we'll be able to open up this next area and get this, awesome free loot. And like, I thought that kind of stuff to me is so awesome and amazing, because what you can do is you can really play into that exploration pillar by doing stuff like what Strat was talking about, or doing stuff like what I was saying Smith did, where you just create some absurd effect that would be broken if you were trying to create some sort of balanced combat, but you're not. So it isn't. Yeah.
Yep. Like
Very well put. At the end, yeah, it's not. So you shouldn't, and it isn't. So
right.
It's one of those things you have to commit.
Yeah, which
right?
it doesn't have to be a death trap. Okay, you don't have to like kill you every 5 steps. That's not what it has to be. And quite frankly, with Pathfinder 2, you're gonna have a hard time doing that anyways.
You can like even go like more ridiculous. I've got one part of the dungeon planned out, which is going to like, hey, this part's a roguelike. Every time you go in there, it's going to generate a new thing.
I love it.
Whatever, like. And if the players don't feel like playing that, I've not asked them if they want to or not. It's whatever. They can just decide, hey, this mechanic and the rewards there, we don't want to actually do that. We go elsewhere.
Yep.
And it's a way like to have a lot of in your campaign that you couldn't otherwise.
Yep.
And it's a chance to really experiment with stuff. You're throwing, because you have so much space, you're throwing everything up on the wall. Some of it's going to stick, some of it won't. And some of it will stick with group A, but might not stick with group B, or with player A and maybe not player B. And that's where, you know what? Joe's having a bad day today. You know what, Joe, we're going to humor you, and we're going to go to that part you love but we hate.
Well, that's the other thing too. If you design something shitty or unfair or unfun, your group will go, okay, we just don't go back there, dude. Sorry. Like, we get what you were trying to do, but we don't really want to deal with that. So we don't have to. Right. Whereas like if you're like, well, guys, that's kind of the only thing I have, and you kind of have to go that way to deal with that part of the adventure. So you got to get their letter or journal somehow. Sorry, you have to go this way. Whereas, I remember Aaron created that darkness ping, and we said, well, fuck that. And we never went back. Like we were just like, we're like, all right, well played, sir. Well played. Like, I don't know what to tell you there. But there are a lot of things out there that nowadays that can help you. But I want to stress this. Do not make your dungeon don't make your dungeon feel like you pulled it off of Don John or Dungini, okay? Which are just procedural random generators off the internet. Like, oh, you go into this room and you're like, okay, there are 4 hobgoblins and they are cooking a cow and they are playing with string. And then you go into the next room and you're like, there's a griffin. like it's going to feel just like a bunch of nonsense. It's going to feel like a bunch of random nonsense.
Funhouse dungeon is what they were called.
Yeah. Funhouse dungeon. Yeah.
But you can create your dungeon that way. Just don't build it. Just don't have it run that way. It's for the Dungeon 23 thing. Yes,
exactly. Like, it's fine, but what I'm just simply saying, use these things as inspiration and make it, you know, the same way that I always say that for me, the act of playing the game is sort of a messy, convoluted mess. And it's only later when we look back at the session do we sort of figure out what the actual story of the session was, right? Because at the time we weren't doing anything. We were just throwing shit up against the wall, doing crazy stuff. And then you take a step back and you go, oh, like that was totally cool because your character did that. But that let me later on, I was able to do this thing. And it's like those things almost were related. It's the same thing like when you're randomly creating stuff and using random tables like this. You're just kind of creating ideas. And then you're going to go back and say, okay, how do we thread this together into some sort of tapestry or into some sort of pattern? Because you want people to be able to make inferences. You want them to be able to figure out things about your dungeon and then go, I'm willing to bet I know how this works or what's next or how something operates, because that's all part of that mastery, which I think makes Megadungeon so fun as a player. Because you get to master your environment, you get to master your character, you get to master the monsters. It is a complete and total victory as both a PC, hey, my character rolled well and I beat the monsters, but also as a player, I beat this environment. I am the master of my domain.
And that's where they will like make them retread the space is really nice, because like now you're walking through all of this place in Miasa, so you know how to exactly avoid that spider, how to speed run to there, and now you're in the new part. Now the danger begins, because this is not your place. Before it was. And then that's also where the like combat as war comes back and says, if they invade your domain, they're screwed.
Right.
Like if monsters come in.
Absolutely. You know, one of the things I was going to say, and we got another super chat from him, he said, heart a funhouse dungeon. When in doubt, blame madness. Now, listen, I don't think that's okay for a theme, maybe for a level. You know, someone tapped into the plane of limbo and it broke free, and now the whole level is, you know, rampaging with chaos, and that could be a fun theme. But I don't know that I would do the whole dungeon like that. That would be kind of, you know, rough. But I also am very tangible with my rewards to my players. I'm very open and very honest with them. So one of the things that I think you should do in a mega dungeon is you do want to put something in there. Now, in the old school dungeons, you've got torches and water, and in Pathfinder 2, those things don't matter as much. So you do want something that at least lets them have some sort of sense of progression of time. And we always worry about random encounters in Pathfinder 2, because how is this going to work with the math? How is this going to work with the balancing? Don't they need 50 minutes to treat wounds after the fight? Well, we don't care about those things anymore, right? There's no reason why they can or can't, you know, they don't need to be anywhere. They don't have to do anything. What the dungeon doesn't want them to do is to get the sick treasure and to get the awesome loots. So introducing random encounters can be a fantastic way to pressure your players. And because you're playing Pathfinder 2, if you're like, well, this would be a hard fight because they didn't get a chance to rest, it's like, okay, well, you know, tough shit. I mean, that's just the way it goes. Like you can't, you know, you need something to be able to sort of give them in pressure. But one of the things I love to do is I let my players learn this stuff, this meta information. Like like maybe they don't start off with it. Maybe they hear some rumors on town, and I will show them a chart, and it'll say, you know, percentage 1 to 10, blank space, 11 to 15, blank space, 16 through 20, blank space, 21 through 30, blank space. And then they learn in town, 21 to 30 is goblins, because they heard rumors that there were goblins. And now the party knows. And then as they start encountering things, maybe they make track checks, maybe they make recall knowledge checks. I go, oh, you know that there is a rampaging owlbear that you know, and you know,
$24.94.
Hey, tip from Darth.
I'm a simple man. I see dungeon stream, I tip. But also, just joined the stream, and hear Derek shit talking random tables. I'm disappointed. JK, I get the point. No,
I'm not shit talking random tables. I'm saying, like, you just can't let it be complete nonsense. Thank you, Darth Gorlock. What I was saying is, I will let the players know, oh shit, on a 40 to 50, that's the owlbear. And then when they kill the owlbear, I'll be like, yeah, erase it. You know what's there now? Nothing. Guess what? You have pacified this level. Guess what? Goblins, yeah, remember when you wiped them out? Erase them, right? Like, you are literally making this dungeon less of a pain in the ass. You are literally making this dungeon. Now, when they come back and they see new signs of something and you say, hey, you know that random encounter table that you guys keep as a party for level 1, that 40 to 50 slot, it's now a rampaging pack of ghouls who have come up from the lower level to feast on all of the dead bodies that you left laying around and didn't bother to clean up. Also, the thing that used to be the owlbear, that's now a horde of carrion crawlers, which are spread out through the dungeon because this whole dungeon level is now one gigantic reeking ossuary, some sort of charnel house, because you just left countless dead bodies hewn everywhere, and the dungeon has reacted. And it used to be safe, and now it's not. And now the situation has changed, and maybe you deal with it, or maybe you don't. And, whatever happens, the players did it.
Yeah, I would say they're also. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Strat.
Or maybe you know about that fire trap that you found like 30 sessions ago, which you knew that if you triggered it if you triggered it just the wrong way, it sent it huge flame waves through the entire level, and you just go there and trigger it, run away, and the level's clear again because this is your level. You know how it works.
Yep. Or even something stupid, where you're like, well, guys, if we ever need to fall back, this will be our standpoint. And the rogue and the wizard go, Derek, can we augment that flame trap? We've beat that thing 2 ways to Sunday. I critically succeeded when I disabled it. It's basically my trap now, right? So here's what I want to do. I want to upgrade the DC. I want to add in extra flame jets, right? So that way, they'll do this stuff. They will create gauntlets and death traps, and then they'll go shoot an arrow at the owlbear, get it to chase them through the dungeon back to the flame trap that you've now reset to be more dangerous, and watch that thing get fried and be like, yeah, well done.
I think that a great primer for this kind of idea of going back to the rumor thing, especially, and how it can tie into the actual game and how you can change it and morph it over time, is Keep on the Borderlands. If you've not read the original Keep on the Borderlands, that is a classic for a reason. There's a reason why it's probably the gold standard of the OSR still. It really crystallizes that idea in a way that's it's simple but really well done. And then Village of Hamlet, I would say, is also a secondary to that. Village of Hamlet is kind of the launching point for Temple of Elemental Evil, which Gygax took it, went completely overboard with it. But if you want to see how to do it in a way where it doesn't have to be super thought out or super conceptual, just it could be done very simple, because Keep is 30 pages long or something?
Yeah, 36.
Yeah.
So Ben, I want to talk about this. I'm going to pull this up on screen. This is the derelict ship mapping.
Yes.
And actually, let me quickly change it. This is from, I think it's from a book.
Yes, it is from a supplement for Mothership, the original edition.
Merry Christmas.
$150 from Overlord From, tipping, wishing us a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Overlord in here flexing. You know he's going to get the full Horizon Thunder Sphere. Thank you, Overlord. You are a real MVP. Wow. I know you guys on the chat can't, or you guys on the call can't hear it. Thank you. Thank you, Overlord. We love you. Thank you for your continual support. You're amazing. And going above and beyond with the generosity this holiday season. So thank you so very much. Huge flex. So, Ben, so this is Dead Planet. Violent incursion into the land of the living for the Mothership sci-fi horror role-playing game. Is that what this I'm going to switch over. Is that what this procedural generation thing is from?
Yeah, there are a couple of tables that I clipped from that as well. So Dead Planet is a toolkit, and this is what we were talking about before we went live, and we could talk about this now a little bit, how I find it really ironic and interesting in a funny sort of way that the progenitor of Dungeon 23 is someone whose whole bread and butter is creating things where the first page of like the warden's journal, page 1 is like, just draw a square on a piece of graph paper and write, this is the cyber sleep room. Then draw another square. Like totally not detailed at all. Very open-ended kind of stuff. And then he has tables like this, like really brilliant tables where you just do like a matrix pattern essentially to come up with what is in areas of the ship. But the idea of the derelict ship is going to kind of be the kernel of what I'm going to use for my mega dungeon, except that it's going to be a giant space station. So I'll have to extrapolate and come up with other things to add to it and whatnot. But the idea of it being Dead Planet is a great resource if you're running a sci-fi game. It doesn't matter if it's Mothership or not. Same thing, like it doesn't matter if you're running Dungeon World or not. Doesn't matter if you're running D&D or not. It's all, the tools are there. You just have to kind of use that 5-pound chunk of jelly in your head and figure out how to make it work. The resources are there. It's just how are you going to piece it together. I would say that for a sci-fi, Dead Planet is a must own. And it's what I'm going to be using as like my inspiration. That'll be my oracle as I go through and try and figure out what areas are connected to what, and some of it will be prescripted, but a lot of it will be random.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, I like to use the Tome of Adventure Design. I think it's a fantastic book. Also, I think AEG put out a series of books in 3rd edition called the Toolbox and the Advanced Toolbox, which are also both very good. I love coming up with some random nonsense and being like, how do I make this into something interesting in the dungeon, right? And taking it and building a part of my history of my dungeon. And ideally, when in doubt, follow the rule of 3. If I create a encounter with gargoyles, tie them into something so that they're sort of like the first gargoyle encounter, the 2nd edition, gargoyle encounter, and then the 3rd one. And it's like, oh, cool. We could see this linkage. We could see how each of these kind of ties together and helps tell part of the history of this dungeon. In fact, one of the things that I used to do, in fact, James Malowitzki did that in his mega dungeon, which is called Dwimmermount. There is a list in the beginning of this dungeon, book. It's got like 99 or something. It's like 99 secrets about the dungeon. And like the first one is, a little bit secret. The 99th one is like who shot JFK, right? Like it's like the big secrets of the dungeon, like the true and there's an XP award associated with each of these secrets. And as the party goes through, they go, hey, I learned that we figured this out about the dungeon. Oh, the reason the gargoyles are all coming to life is because they opened the portal to the elemental plane of Earth, and that has been reanimating all the statues. Got it. And you're like, cool. That wasn't a knowledge check. That was a players figuring out things. Here's experience points. Because remember, what gets rewarded gets repeated. We got a super chat from Great Role Playing Debbie. Your flex $150, my flex $2. Thanks, you Phoenix. Still names changed from the Poppet stream, by the way. I love it. Hey, listen, you know what? You're all strong in my book, okay? Strong.
There's one other thing. I'm sorry.
No.
I just wanted to point out real quick while we still have the derelict ship mapping, and this can be incorporated in your fantasy dungeons as well. If you're using something like an oracle to create random sections, in this case, could use D6s to do this. I'm probably going to be using like 1,000 D6s. But when you do this, if the 2 dice next to each other add up to a 7, there are secret ducts, air ducts that connect those sections of the ship together. You could do the same thing where you might say every time if I roll on a thing, if a 6 comes up on a D20 or whatever, there's a secret door, and it kind of connects these areas together to add a little bit of interest and runs around things. Like the idea of just creating, I wrote, okay, so on day 1, I did room 1, on day 2, I did room 2, and by day 15, you have 15 rooms basically in a railroad, having ways where they can double back on each other, secret passages, works really, really well for adding interest, because when the bad things happen, the players are going to be like, okay, we need a way out of the space. They're going to start looking for these other avenues. And if you don't have those baked in already, then it's going to feel a little bit like a gotcha, I think.
I agree. No, I think adding those like fun little, again, those ways to manipulate the space. The GM wants us to go this way, but we don't have to. We found this way. We'll just go around it. Screw your stupid encounter. So, because I have two expert PF2 people here on the stream, I do want to talk about this. I want to talk about the elephant in the room. Okay? Something which has been happening since 2000, and it's a problem, and we need to talk about it. Which is this. Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder 2 do not award you experience points for doing cool things. They award you experience points for having encounters.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, there's a number of changes you have to make to, if you want to use Pathfinder 2 for this for some reason. And one of the key ones is...
And 5th edition.
Yeah, sure. So I run, like, my home game, large dungeon thing is technically Pathfinder 2. I think the list of house rules is like 3 pages long, and one of them says screw the skill system.
I don't think you have to drop the skill system, though.
You don't have to, but like I have a very extreme stance on that, like on rewarding player creativity and like making it more about like interacting with the world. Anyway, the main point is you have to make a lot of changes to make it work in Pathfinder 2, in 5e, in all of those things that, honestly, Pathfinder 2 is the best example, because like Pathfinder 2, like if you dig into it, it kind of hates that it's a D20 game.
It wants to be a story system. Yeah.
All of these like clever, cool things that you can do to like manipulate spaces and so on, they're now uncommon. You can't get them by default. Things are like toned down. You have like ways to obsolete game mechanics, mostly gone. Incorporeal creatures, not immune to stuff anymore, but like everything can be beaten by just striking, because if you have a linear AP, you need to do that. You can't have just this monster is completely invulnerable if you don't have the mystical weapon from, like a Vorpal weapon, whatever.
Right.
Yeah, you do have to mess with rarity a little bit, because PF2 was designed to play adventure paths. So you do got to mess with some of it, and kind of bring it back to playing in a dungeon. You got to make those uncommon stuff common, make some of that rare stuff even common. Let the players have a little bit more freedom in what they can build, for sure.
Track things back in from Pathfinder 1 or from like BX, that sort of stuff. And like, one big thing, XP. Don't reward XP for killing creatures.
Yep.
So one example the example I've gone with is I've got specific items that for story relevant purposes are strewn across the entire dungeon. It's like one of the key mysteries why they're there for the players to explore. And if they collect 3 of them and bring them back to home base, they get a level up.
Yep, that's great. Yep, that's great.
And
because you got to think about what you're rewarding, right? What are you encouraging? What is the behavior that you're encouraging? The behavior that Strat is encouraging there is exploration, finding stuff, looking for it. And if you could be clever and you can avoid fights, you're not punished for that. Okay, because the biggest problem with awarding XP for killing monsters is the players feel like, now I'm not saying you don't have to give any XP for giving monsters. In fact, when I played my dungeon from Pathfinder 1, so you're talking about your standard 3rd edition dungeon, right? When I played this dungeon, I gave a third as much experience points for combat encounters that you would normally get. I gave the party experience, consummate. It was dependent on the level, but I gave them experience for each new room that they discovered. You know, it was a small amount, like the equivalent of like in Pathfinder 2 would be like the equivalent of like 20 XP or something like that, or 10 XP. It was a small amount, but if they were like, hey, let's go explore a bunch of rooms, cool, you got rewarded for that. And then, yes, I gave them experience points for discovering major components of lore about the dungeon and for finding notable treasures. I didn't worry about like calculating GP for treasure, but when they would find what I would call a vault or a hoard, like I would take, like you might find here and there and little bits of treasure, but then there was some secret room or some guarded room or some special room. And inside of it was like a +1 shocking longsword, a wand of lightning bolts, several thousand GP and sapphires. That was a hoard. That was something that the players, ideally, unless they were really just completely fucking around, they knew about this in advance. This has been like the heist that they have been trying to do for the past, several sessions. And when they got that, huge amount of experience points. So you got to realize you got to reward what you want to encourage.
I'll say something I've seen in PF2 specifically that I feel like was a good reward for exploration. Shout out to Darth Gorlock. In Northern Reaches, he ran one of the dungeons for the Forsaken. Basically, at any point in time, we could go and say, okay, we're going to go and fight the boss. But on the way to the boss, we had several different, and on each floor, he told us at the beginning, there was a place we could find that we could power ourselves up or power the boss down at each level. So it was actually rewarding the players to go, hey, go seek these places out, go explore, try to find it. The only bad thing was, unfortunately, we were on a little bit of a time limit, so we didn't get to explore as much as we would have liked. But something like that could work in a PF2 Mega Dungeon, where you tell everybody, hey, at each level, there's something your players can find that will get them something you wouldn't normally be able to get. Get them an extra bonus that you can't get normally any other way.
Yep. Yeah, you gotta encourage them.
Like, I'm also a huge fan of progression completely outside of what you can get from level ups. This entire system of diegetic progression and all of that. Just, you can make so many. You can have fill your mega dungeon with 1 million rewards, like random things like puzzles, whatever. Just random things give you like bonus feeds, new stuff.
Yep. And I'll tell you what, Strat is right, because here's why. Here's the beautiful thing for it, for all of you people at home who are worried. Here's the problem. Let's say that you are playing Strength of Thousands AP, okay? And you're going to level 20, and the group is like level 4 or 5, and you give them a +3 greater striking, greater fearsome elemental fire sword because they did something amazing. Guess what? That breaks your game. But you're worried because you're like, oh my God, this is going to like make all the encounters trivial, and they still have to go through all the encounters. And then like the story isn't progressed and they're going to go kill the bad guy. It ruins it. It does. It can. It really will, especially if you care about the story. But let's say that happens in our mega dungeon that we're building, and the group gets some, maybe it's like Final Fantasy. You give it to the war priest, so they actually feel
maybe
useful.
they get a Tarrasque flail.
Yeah. The players are in charge here. The players could say, yeah, we're going to just kill everything easily. Okay. And if your party isn't getting bored with that, if they love it, if they love but you know what? Probably they're going to say, wow, we're really broken. Let's go to level, 9 and see what we can fight on level 9. And guess what's going to happen? They're going to get a lot of experience points because they're fighting things that are much higher level than them. So they're going to level up quicker. And then they're just going to catch up to where they should be anyways. And then they'll feel kind of like a badass for a little bit. Then they'll be the same level they were. And the worst case scenario is your campaign finishes a little bit earlier, and you could be one of the 5 people in existence who actually played a campaign from 1 to 20, like legitimately, and their players did it and beat it, and the game ended, and nobody quit, and nobody had to remake their character, and you didn't fudge anything, and you go, wow, we actually did it, great, awesome. And then you know what's beautiful about D&D? You fucking just do it again. Like hell, you could be like, well, you guys just want to run that dungeon back? You're like, yeah, let's just do that again, because there's so much that we didn't explore. You could do that because it doesn't matter. Okay, see the map that's on, it's a little low res. You see the map here that's on screen? On the right side lower right side, there's a room that looks like it has 4 alcoves. It's room 35 or 34 or something. that room had 3 swords floating in the middle of it. One of these swords instantly kill anything that it hit.
Nice.
Okay? But each round, but it was cursed. Once you picked up the sword, you lost 1 point of constitution permanently per round. You could not get rid of the sword. And when you got to 0 constitution, your character was removed from the campaign. Your soul was consumed. There was no coming back from you whatsoever. Okay? That sword was in level 1 of my dungeon. And what happened was 10 levels later, on level 10, when the party fought a CR19 evil gold dragon, they remembered that sword, and the wizard teleported the fighter back to that room. The fighter, without hesitating, grabbed the sword. They teleported back. Then the thief stole a ring of 3 wishes from that dragon's hoard to give the dragon so that the player would have a much greater chance of hitting. He hit the dragon died, and then the thief felt bad about it, so he used his wish. And I said, no, you can't. He's like, I'm going to use my wish on Tim to take the. I go, no, you can't stop the curse. Nothing can stop the curse. He goes, I'm not stopping the curse. I'm just transferring it onto me. And everyone's like, I was like, okay, that's totally fine. And so then his character was permanently deleted from the campaign. As long as one character got permanently deleted, I was fine to trade in for that. And here's the thing. Was that broken? I don't know. Was it unfair? I don't know. But my players loved every minute of it because they were in control. It wasn't a gotcha. They were they were adults making informed decisions, empowered by their knowledge and their characters' abilities. And they felt amazing. Now, is this the best way to play the game? No, because like sometimes I want to play samurai drama. Sometimes I want to play, political machinations in a dark city filled with weird ghosts and no sun. And I want to be a scoundrel, and I want to play Blades in the Dark. Sometimes I want to play Legend of the 5 Rings. So sometimes there are different games to play. But these games fundamentally are dungeon games.
Yep. This may not be necessarily the best way to play a TTRPG, but it certainly is the best way to play a D20 system.
Yeah.
Or D&D.
Yeah. And there's like, you look at the abilities, you're like, oh, look at this class feat. My rogue is always detecting traps, or they're always searching, even when they're moving in exploration mode. Like, that's cool. Like, awesome. Like, these things are legitimately useful. I mean, here's what I'm going to say. A couple things. Number one, a lot of people here are patrons. So really, we're just talking to the patrons. Number one is we are going to make this a forum, or we're going to make this its own channel. Number two, I'm going to encourage, we'll probably have one section of the forum just dedicated to, giving like resources, whether it's a book that you buy or a free PDF online or something like that. We're going to fill that up because I want people to have as many resources as you can for this. And I think it's going to be a fun thing that we're going to, do as we go into the new year. And Knights of Last Call are going to do it. And we'll probably put them on shorts or something like that each day just to kind of see where we're advancing. And we'll probably do a video every once in a while. Maybe we'll bring some people on from the Patreon and we'll kind of like do like a little fireside chat. Like, tell me about your dungeon, or tell me about your spaceship, Ben. And we can talk about what we've learned and what we've grown and how we've developed it. And again, if you don't feel like one a day, then don't do one a day. Do 2 a week. Just, the idea is to push yourself to create something. But I would also say to anybody who is listening to this, if you've only played Pathfinder 2nd Edition or Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition in the context of an adventure path, I really think that you owe it to yourself and to your players to at least try this style of game, because you're going to find that there's so many things that you've been fighting against, and you think that it's a horrible design. Turns out it's a great design. You're just using it for the wrong thing, right? It's like trying to screw in a screw with a hammer, and you say, this is a shitty tool. No, you're just using it wrong, right? Go get a screwdriver. The hammer's good at hammering in nails. So it's the same idea here. It's like these games are really good at doing this. And, they've changed the DNA a lot, but not that much. This is like, chimpanzee and I don't know, eastern baboon. Like they're very close in terms of their DNA. So, yeah. So, Penguin.
God damn it. I will say, one room a day does sound a little intimidating.
Sure.
I first thought it was intimidating until it was either Ben or you, Derek, described it, or I posted that Twitter post where it's like you can literally just do the room is I don't know, a giant snake and a ruby in it, and that's your design, that's your room for the day, and so you don't have to overwhelm yourself thinking, okay, I need to design this awesome elaborate room every single day. No, it can be as simple as like, here's this cool room with this cool stuff in it, just every day.
That short line of description, that gets you between half an hour to 2 sessions worth of gameplay, depending on your players and the level.
That's absolutely correct. I like what KC said in chat. He said, Dungeon 23 is basically just smart, like, specific, measurable, actionable, reasonable, timely, for a mega dungeon. And if the day doesn't work with you, just find the reasonable number that works for you. And I completely agree with that. And the other thing is too, if you're thinking about a mega dungeon as something that you're actively playing in, like you could think of it as like concentric rings of detail, right? Like you only really need detailed information for those first, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 rooms that your players are really definitely probably have a chance of going to next session. And if it's, the session, if it's one beyond that, well, okay, it's a little bit more vague. And if it's another session beyond that, it's even more vague. And here's another tip of advice. You've got your starting room, okay? And you're trying to play this mega dungeon. And you go, okay, so there's a door to the left, and then there's a door straight ahead, and there's a door to the right. And you're like, okay, I've got a couple rooms to the left, just detailed, and I've got a couple rooms to the right detailed. And you're like, okay, oh shit, it's session time. What if my party goes north? Just turn into a secret door, like, or erase it and have it be it's a passage. It's full of rubble. And make it into an iron door that is carved with a glowing blue sigil. And the party's like, oh shit, what's beyond that door? And you're like, I don't know, because you don't know. And they're not going to get through it on the first session. Okay. But what you do is like 5 sessions later, after you've had time to detail that, and then you make it something awesome because they think it's going to be something awesome. They find an old book, okay, or an inscription on the wall in an otherwise empty room, and they see the symbol, and then they see another symbol, and you go, oh, if we reflect that symbol with a mirror, that's how we open the door. And then they go and they reach into their equipment list and they pull out a mirror and they shine it to the room and it bounces back and it opens up and they're going to be like, oh my God, we are the fucking masters of the universe.
Also, like if your players just run off into a direction, basic speed run out of sight of the area you've prepped, don't be afraid of just telling them, hey guys, you can go there if you want. But like, if you do, we'll have to end the session here because I don't have these areas prepped.
Yep.
You want to do something else before, so have a session, otherwise we can end.
Yeah.
Literally what Darth just said in the chat.
Yeah. That's the other thing. We're all adults. We're playing with adults, or at least very smart children. Just be honest with them, and the way that you would with any other person that's reasonable, and say, and even do it in like a holy shit. You guys got way further than I imagined. There's totally stuff down this way, but I don't have any of it prepped yet. So either we can end it tonight, or we can maybe backtrack and we can go back to something else that we did before, and we can pick this up. I will definitely spend the next week or 2 detailing this area, and we'll pick it up next time. And there you go.
There's also a trick for running down, like when you run a mega dungeon that way. At the end of the session, ask the players, where do you plan to go? And then make the commitment, hey, if you go where you said you were going to go, that stuff's going to be prepped. If you go elsewhere, might have it prepped, might not.
Yeah, absolutely. And there isn't a mega dungeon campaign that I have ever GM'd or been a part of that didn't spawn some sort of offline, off-game conversation, chat, where the party was always sort of like theory crafting or talking about their plans, and you're the GM, so you can just snoop into that and you can just see what they're planning on doing and see what they're thinking about doing. And you know, and just have fun with it and just explore the space. I like Boofy. Oh no, my microphone's cutting out here. Don't know what's going on. Sorry, I guess we'll have to pick it up next time. Yeah, I think all those are fantastic ideas. So yeah, I think people undersell what the mega. I think it's viewed as being this old-fashioned thing, and I will say this too. There are no stories from my Mega Dungeon campaigns that are like tear-jerking, like, oh my god, it was such a moment of pathos, like it was this great. We don't have those. But I tell you this, we have incredible stories, right? We don't have like critical role moments, right? We have good moments. Like we have like these incredible like my group still talks about the stupid using the pigments to paint the fake hallway so they could get past the sentry golem, right? Like this is such an incredible. There was a lower level where they were fighting a beholder, and the paladin had like the holy avenger and was just like primed to kill this thing, but he couldn't fly, and so it was again a little bending of the rules. But like a character used like wall of stone, and like as the paladin was running, he was like making a ramp. And the paladin was like running up this ramp, this magically created, and then he got to the end of it, he jumped off, and he hit the beholder, crit, smite, cheers, waking up the whole house. And yeah, like that's not necessarily like this narrative, like book dramatic moment, but it's a D&D moment. It's a legitimate, it's the kind of moment that you can only get playing these games.
That's why we play the game.
Yeah, exactly.
You can have those moments though. It's like the same principle of a mega dungeon. Fill your mega dungeon full of NPCs that can be interacted with. Eventually, one of those NPCs is going to be interesting. Is going to spawn off. The players will care about them, and eventually something's going to happen. Like if there's interconnections between it, like we spent an entire session just talking with this one NPC, and it was a mix of like talking about the tragedy of the military and like of past traumas mixed with, hey, let me teach you how agriculture works.
I can't even imagine
at the end of the day.
Yeah, your game's supposed to be real wild. Remember I was talking about those crazy moments that you can only get in D&D? That's what I was talking about.
Yeah, but like this is more of a story. Like this is like NPC interactions, crazy moment.
Oh, a sec. We got a tip from Greg.
After running the original Tomb of Horrors. But it was unforgettable and one of the best sessions ever.
Greg says there were a lot of tears after they finished running Tome of Horrors, but it was unforgettable. It was one of the greatest sessions ever. And yeah, Tome of Horrors isn't going to create something that you would like probably want to read or watch on TV. It creates a moment for you and your group. And guess what? You're not playing for a live studio audience. You're not playing for Twitch or for Knights of Last Call, right? The only people that you have to impress are you people. The only people who have to walk away from this going, that was awesome, is you all. If your campaign is one gigantic inside joke, like, that's fine. Like, you did it right. So thank you, Greg. I think you're absolutely right. Like, it doesn't have to be amazing for it to be amazing. And then Vin said, I love stealing and remixing player ideas. And he says, is listening to your players snooping or research. And, great role-playing Debbie said, let's be honest, they're going to have some cooler ideas than you are. Steal them 100%. And this is something I've seen all the time, which is like, you'll hear people like this, supposedly this happened with like Game of Thrones, and this happened with like the show Lost, where like people have these fan theories that gain a lot of things, and then the writers read them, and then they go, they think they're so smart, they figured out my plan. Well, I'm going to change it up. I'm going to subvert their expectations. I'm going to give them something that they'll never expect, and everyone hates it. Instead, what's awesome is when the players go, oh, we were right. We were smart and capable, and we figured things out, and the GM gave us hints and clues, and we put them together in the way that made the most logical sense, and then that benefited us greatly, and also we felt like badasses. Then my character crit with a sneak attack while spell striking, and it was just absolutely the best thing that's ever happened in my whole life. Like my children were born, and then it was like that moment. Like that's like like that's the ranking of how things go. Self-confessed cynic does have a design question. and and again, thank you, gentlemen, for hanging out with us. I promised you 2 hours. We're a little bit over that, but we can. If you need to dip out, please go for that. But Vin asked, how do you plan connections between levels? That's a great question. Any thoughts, Strat, Ben?
Stairs.
Yeah.
Or turbo lift or something.
Elevators.
Yeah, you don't have to get too fancy with it, but there are some great tricks you can use if you have enough of it planned. See, that's why I'm an advocate of planning the thing out first. If you're going to do this, doing it week to week, with running out of map and stuff, that's not going to fly. At least have a month or two ahead, because that gives you the ability to have things like there's some classic old dungeon. We'll call them tricks, but they're not really tricks. They're more like ideas where you might have a staircase. They get to the stairs, and it looks like it goes down, but what they don't realize as they're going down, it's on a lever, and it actually takes them somewhere else. But you don't realize that as you're going up or down the stairs. It just feels like you're climbing, but it's actually going on a cantilever, having them turn into a slide, so they have no choice, and they go like they might see the next level, and it's like, well, this one goes down 4 levels. They're like, well, we're only going to go to the first landing. Great. As they go halfway down, it turned into a slide, takes them right down to the bottom. You can come up with some fun house ideas for that, but I mean, the stairs are there for a reason. Don't reinvent the wheel. Yeah, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. I will say this. This is something that had a huge impact on me. I think it's in the player's guide. From Necromancer Games, their legendary mega dungeon called Rapana Thuk. And there is this classic line, which is repeated in Rapana Thuk, which is, don't go down the well. It's kind of like it's like the known thing, right? And I've taken that idea and I basically make it a part of almost every dungeon that I build. Literally, sometimes it's a well, just because it's very obvious. And what it is it is an immediate access, bearing in mind that maybe you need ropes or it's not as convenient as a stairway, but it's like an immediate access to a hard level of the dungeon. So imagine if you enter into this ruined dungeon and you come down through the crumbling ruins and you come down the stairway and it enters into a large pillared hall. And you see that amongst the arched gableways, there's a vast corridor leading to the west and to the north and to the east. And you've reached level 1, where kobolds and goblins abound. And there, in the center of the room, is a yawning pit that goes down to level 4 of the dungeon, or level 3 of the dungeon. And if the players wanted to, they could just get a rope, spike it to something, and start climbing down to it. Now, I like this because I like to give my players as much freedom to explore the space as possible. So I like doing things like having that. Now, obviously, in that, like Ben was saying, you have to plan that in advance. You have to have that option available in advance. But I like giving them, and then you give them the rumor, right? Which is like, they say there's like a +2 flaming sword, like right at the bottom of the well, right? Like you want to give them the temptation and then say, but it's up to you. And then let them decide. And then outside of that, yes, stairs.
And even better, if that rumor is not just something they randomly get, but like if they have to fight to get that rumor, if like this is in some treasure chest somewhere else, then they're really gonna be interested in that rumor.
Right.
Especially
Or
if
if they
scratched on the inside of a treasure chest.
Yes.
If someone used like with their dying breath, scratched on the inside and then sealed it inside this chest, and it never made it out because then they got ambushed or something like that. And that's the secret. It's kept on the inside of this thing. They're going to be like, well, we're going down that well. But everyone else in the town said that's the worst thing to do. Yeah, but we're doing it anyway.
Right. And that's the other thing. It's like, it's that big cojones type thing, like, because then you can have it. You can have level 1 full of moderate and severe encounters and not feel like you're doing anything to dishonor Pathfinder 2's math or 5th edition's math. But then if the party really wants to go fight a level 5 monster at level 1, they can go down the frickin' pit, and they can go fight that. Like you're giving them that option, and they can, if they've got the, I wouldn't recommend it at level 1 in Pathfinder 2, but if they've got the whatever to do it, they could do it. Great role playing. Debbie said, make empty rooms that have shafts down covered in floors like a sewer grate. Yeah, like you want to, it could be a reward, it could be a temptation. Sometimes the stairs down can be the reward for having, found a certain area or unlocked a certain area. Same thing. I heard people mention this. I'm a big fan of this as well. Having multiple entrances to the dungeon, right? Because again, it feels like you got a backstage pass, right? When everybody else is like a peon, they go in through the main entrance to the dungeon, but you know about the secret waterfall cave that allows you direct access to level 3, so you can bypass all the riffraff on levels 1 and 2 and get right to the good stuff, and not a lot of people even know about that. I like that because again, it's showing mastery. It's showing that sort of player-driven ownership of the dungeon.
Right, and I think things that a player learns about in the dungeon is going to make them want to go and do it more.
Mm-hmm.
Like, as opposed to, oh, we heard this rumor in town. I mean, yeah, that's cool. But if you're physically seeing evidence of something in a dungeon, it's like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
We got to go see that.
Please, Strat, please.
It makes them not only want to like go do that thing more than if they heard it, they also want to go explore the dungeon more because there's like more cool information they can find.
Right.
And information itself can be its own reward in that kind of style,
mm-hmm.
which then feeds into this whole being more and more engaging loop.
Yep. And whatever you do, I mean, I hate it anyways, but whatever you do, completely do not ruin all your hard work by stupid recall knowledge checks. Like, don't let somebody be like, well, what's the mystery of this? I make a recall knowledge check. Don't do that. Just don't do that. Just don't do that.
That's the first thing I cut from the game. Recall knowledge, only thing it gives you is like common knowledge monster abilities. Bam.
Yeah. I'm okay with right. We have our PC. It's our avatar. It gives us capabilities and information as a sort of proxy for us in the world, but it should not get rid of the person, right? The player should ultimately be the person who is steering the wheel, or steering the bus, behind the wheel, I should say. Like, don't rob your players by saying, like, I mean, for starters, can we all agree the lamest thing in the history is when your character makes the recall knowledge check and then everybody else has to hear the knowledge getting expositorily spouted from the DM's mouth. It's just such a disconnect. It doesn't even feel correct. Like, it's so weird. Like in D&D, I don't know if you all feel this way, but if there's a pit and the GM says, make the check, I roll the check and everybody at the table, including me, feels like I'm the one leaping over the pit. But when my character knows something, it never feels like I'm the one who knows it because I don't know shit. I'm just listening to what the GM is telling me. I hate reading the whole knowledge.
Well, you do this thing where the GM tells you in some way, and then you repeat it to the party, and it's all.
Oh, that's that's the worst.
Yeah.
That's even worse. Might even be worse. Guys, I believe. Now, granted, I love when I play a Powered by the Apocalypse game, and someone makes a spout lore check and they succeed. I will say, "Well, what do you know?" And they'll be like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "What do you know about this creature? You're the expert. I'm not. You tell me." And then I'm like, you make me the creature.
That's why I like to run. Where just let them create the fiction right there on the spot.
Right.
You made the check. You know the thing. You tell me the thing, and then we'll make that.
You're the one who spent 5 years training with Hagrid in care of magical beasts at Hogwarts. You know a lot more about this monster than I do. Please inform us. Let us know. Now, here's the thing. That's obviously awesome for Dungeon World. I don't necessarily know that that's the kind of game I would want to do for a true old, kind of old school dungeon call stuff. Greg C says the creature skin is worth 100,000 gold. I would be 100,000% down with that.
Yeah, Gardens of Yin has things like that where you come across
self-confessed cynic says I hate all of this.
Oh man, you come across bones they're extremely delicate. They're basically made of alabaster. The bones of something I don't want to spoil anything of, but you come across these bones and there's an average of 200 bones per creature, and each bone is worth like 200 gold pieces, but they're made of alabaster, so they're extremely fragile. So if you can even make it out, like they're just shattering all left, right. You just keep describing, you know, if there's 10 bones that just got shattered when you did that thing, and they're just like, no.
That's funny.
I love the idea. I love the idea of Vin being just like, no, it has to be real. No.
You can have narrative.
But again, I actually am saying that if I was using a D20 based game, I wouldn't be doing that type of thing in this game. But I also wouldn't let people being like, I make a recall knowledge check to solve it. You know, solve the puzzle, solve the mystery. I wouldn't let them do that. Like,
I mean, I'm going to detail on that. There's a lot of things that you don't want to have. Like, the thing about skills in D20 is that the skill system exists to skip gameplay.
Yes.
And so you need to be very careful about what skill checks you allow if you're trying to run like this mega dungeon thing, especially with like the incarnation of the skill system you happen to have if you're like playing 5e or Pathfinder 2, which is not the skill system explicitly designed for dungeon crawling, just inherited. And so you like the lack of use rope, by the way, is incredibly annoying. As a side note,
well, I don't think you need a skill for use rope anymore.
I was going to say you have thievery, right? Isn't that the use rope?
Well, but to Strat's point, consider the difference between these two ideas. Okay, there's a trap in the hallway. Okay, in a standard Pathfinder 2 thing, you go, there's a trap. What triggers it? Being in that square. Okay, I thievery it. Okay, you made one success. I thievery it again. It is disabled. Okay, but that is like how the game operates. Now, skills allow us to represent something that we cannot represent otherwise at the table. Okay, this is why we have attack rolls, right? Because I don't know, like, how are you going to tell me, I think my character hit? Well, I don't think you did hit. So we need something to be able to manifest that. Where thievery could come in is you say, you know, you notice something unusual about this, square or, the section of the hallway in front of you. And you say, well, what's so unusual about it? You realize that there are several stones, okay, which are raised up above the surface of the floor. And then you say, oh, they're probably pressure plates, maybe. And you're like, hey, can I like take like a wedge and put it in between the pressure plates to like jam it? And you say, I don't know, can you? And then they say, can I make a thievery check to see if I could do that? And you say, yes. And what you're doing is you're kind of applying fiction first gaming to your game. You're saying thievery isn't just some magical like thievery, right? You're not like, I mean, Aaron always used to joke about that all the time with like like he'd be like, I am a diplomancer, diplomacy, bend to my will. And it's like, what are you doing? I'm diplomacying, right? So thievery, thievery could be the great, if you were like, case in point, no one would ever allow this. You're like, okay, well, in front of you, there's a physical obstacle. And you're like, I athletics it. Okay, but what are you actually doing? I'm jumping over the pit. Okay, well, I don't know how far your character can jump. Maybe you don't know. We kind of have a rough idea. Let's roll it because it's random chance. Thievery can be used the same way, where it's like, I'm doing this delicate operation. The thievery skill comes in as a rules in order to help us adjudicate what happens. It should never be thievery and like you ripple out this shockwave of thievery into the square that the trap triggers on. And that's what I would avoid that kind of shit.
And that's the common counterpoint to that is often but then are you expecting me to become an expert on like trap solving and so on? The answer to that is yes. Yeah, that's the game.
Yeah. I mean, flip it back the other way. Are you expecting me to be like a master in small unit fantasy tactics? Like, am I supposed to know how to like flank and hold a hallway? Like, these are all things that the game, like, would you ever do this in your game? The fight breaks out and you go, Derek, my fighter, can I make like a warfare lore check? What do I do here? What do you mean? What do you do? Move my, I don't know, give me a success against the combat. Like, my character is way better at war. Look, he's an expert in warfare lore. Dude, I've never even been in a fist fight in my whole life. I got pushed once in elementary school and I cried for 3 days, okay? Like, what are we talking about here? but you're a fighter. Yeah, my character is a fighter. I am a pacifist. And it's like, okay, well, so then you're not even playing the game? No, I'm playing the game. I'm right. We would find that to be absurd, right? Derek, what feat should I use this round? Well, what do you mean? What feat? Well, my fighter would know, right? And he's a way better. Actually, my fighter is probably a better fighter, honestly, than you, GM. So really, if you think about it, like whatever he says should go because he's the best person here. Everyone agrees that this is completely stupid, and yet we do it all the time with every other skill. And it's because we all have this massive raging hard-on for combat and being cool and stupid anime shit, and I can't stand it. Okay,
I feel called out.
Okay, like I'm getting off on a rant here, but all I'm just trying to say is like don't let the skills play the game for you. That's all.
Know what game you're trying to play.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Great role-playing Debbie coming in here with a $20 super chat. Allowing some I solve the mystery checks can be cool. Those scratch marks look like, I don't know, definitely a predator, possibly some sort of X or Y or Z group of animals. That is where you should use recall knowledge. That is, I think, a totally acceptable, reasonable of that. Because here's the thing. Do I expect for my players, if I describe the depth and striations of the scratches on the wall, is my player going to be like, oh, it's definitely a griffin? Like, no, of course they're not. That's stupid, right? But do I want a player to come in and go, Derek, I'm investigate the room. I'll make a knowledge check. What do I know? That's horrible. You're taking the game out of them. That's like the fighter saying, Derek, I make a check. I combat this combat. Right? No, we're going to let them interact with it. The fighter's going to move. They're going to flank. They're going to choose to double slice. Then they roll their dice. It's the same thing with exploration. Your character's going to come in. They're going to look around. The GM's going to describe some scratches. Your character's going to look at them. The GM's going to describe them. The player's going to go, kind of sounds like an animal. The druid's going to say, animal? And they're going to come over. And the druid says, can you take a look at these? And the GM says, are they animal scratches? They look like animal scratches. Do I know what kind? Just make a check. Oh, you do know. They're griffins, but actually you rolled a nat 1, so they're clown shoes.
Or, maybe for some reason your game actually is about identifying animal scratches because, I don't know, it's just a major theme of your thing, in which case they have to know it, just know what your game's about.
Right. And you know what? There probably is some role-playing game out there where you do have to be able to identify magical scratches. Here, you want to hear something really cool?
Could be fun.
Here, you want to hear a cool thing? Going back to Dungeon. Okay, ready? All right. Going back to I won't bring it up. One of the wizards, or one of the players in my Dragon's game was a wizard specialty diviner. And as part of their character, it's kind of a meta thing, but also kind of an in-game thing. Whenever the group would discover a new level, okay, I would send this player a copy of the map of that level, unlabeled, via email. And I told them they could study this map for as much as they want between sessions, but they could not bring it up in the session. They could not print it, and they could not mention that they had access to this map. And what would end up happening is we would be playing the session, and this diviner wizard would go, I think we should go east. And it'd be like, why? And you're like, I don't know. I just get a sense that there's something, maybe I don't know, secret door or an extra, we missed something. Let's go to the east. And then they go to the east and they find a secret door. And everyone's like, holy shit, you're like a diviner. But they didn't know that I had given them the map and that they were studying it between the sessions. So if you want to include scratch marks, send the druid a bunch of images of scratch marks with description adjectives. And then during the game, when you describe them, they could be like, oh, those are definitely owl bears. But no, I mean, that's where skills can come in.
All right. Yeah, that's really badass, actually.
Oh yeah, that was so fun. It was so awesome. Because I was like, look, you're a diviner, you have insights, you have a million, clairvoyances and clairaudiences and scrying spells. Like, I'm going to just give you the map. but you have to memorize it before we go into the session, and you can consult it between the sessions as much as you want. You're never really quite sure what level they're going to be on. And it was awesome. It was so fun. But anyways, I like having fun with that. That to me is like an example of like a meta fun reason where it really reinforces the fantasy of your character being what they are. Like a great example of this, kind of off topic, but like if you've ever played True Dungeon, which is like a puzzle escape room, but you play D&D, they have these at like Gen Con and stuff. The way they do combat is with a shuffleboard. Okay. Like, like one of those bar shuffleboards where you have to slide it across the wood and it has to end. And at the end of the shuffleboard, there's like an outline of the monster and there's different areas and it shows you how much damage you did and you slide your little puck. And if it lands like on their arm, they take 1 point of damage. But if it lands on like their head, they take 10 points of damage. The fighter just gets a big fucking giant puck. Right. Like that's how they represent. Cause they're like, well, you're not actually going to be better at shuffleboard. So we're just going to give you a giant fucking puck. And that way you're probably never going to miss and it'll probably land on something good and it'll represent your character actually being a good fighter. I love stuff like that. Anyways.
Stuff that aligns the PC and the player is always great.
Yeah. Oh, 100% agreed. That's when you're having the most fun. When you're like, my character's cool, but I'm cool. Like we're all cool. Like those moments are, far and few between. The other thing too, by the way, I'm just because players actually are a lot better than I give them credit for. And which isn't to say that I don't like players, but what I'm trying to say is like, I think players at the end of the day, like, especially if they're playing an AP, they feel bad if they do something that's going to fuck up the story, right? Like if they kill the villain and they know that they probably weren't supposed to, or they do something when they're like, I want to do this, but also like, I know it's probably going to screw with the and they feel bad about it. They're like, I probably shouldn't be doing this, but I'm going to do it anyways. Or, oops, I didn't realize we were messing. I was just doing what I thought my character would do. I didn't realize this was going to create like a whole problem. And like, it can lead to this kind of bad feeling where you feel like I'm worried. When I played with Bob, this was such an eye opener to me. Bob had never played RPGs before. And when we played Rise of the Rune Lords, he told me after maybe the first 10 or 15 episodes, he said, I'm so nervous. And I said, why? He goes, I'm so worried I'm going to do the wrong thing and screw up the adventure. Because there's a right way to do it. And then there's a wrong way to do it. And in these dungeon games, you get rid of that. It's just, whatever floats your boat. Great role-playing Debbie says, or you could do what my GM did and say my int 20 witch got critical story spell components because ADHD player forgot to say that I was getting them from the shop. Also totally reasonable as well. In fact, I used to do that with my super high int wizard opponents. I would have their higher level spell slots and I would have a couple of blanks in there and I would just have them take whatever right spell they needed at that moment. Because I was like, this wizard is smarter than me. So I think that's pretty cool as well. All right, folks. We're going to go around the horn for some final thoughts. Strat, final thoughts, Dungeon 20. First things first. Are you going to be doing Dungeon 23?
Yep, I have a Megadungeon in the works, like where my campaign's in. It needs more rooms. May as well combine those two things.
A sub-question. Do you think Megadungeons should be in Northern Reaches Season 2?
Are we playing Pathfinder 2?
Yes.
Then no.
Oh. All right. I was going to call you Penguin. Pumpkin. What about you? So I know that you were kind of brought into this last minute. So
yeah, I do.
So let me ask you a first question.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So what do you, now that you've heard more ideas about what a mega dungeon is, what it isn't, what it might be good for, what it might not be great for, what are your kind of thoughts and feelings on the subject?
So for one, whole new perspective on a mega dungeon, which I think maybe a lot of players who haven't really put a lot of thought into it probably think of dungeons as very linear, which they're not, especially if designed correctly, and maybe even a little boring. But this sounds like the most exciting most exciting thing you could do in PF or in any D20 game is play in a dungeon, just from this conversation. And yeah, I'm totally excited to build and or play in a Mega Dungeon now.
Yeah, playing in them, they're both fun, honestly.
Yeah, and I definitely want to do the Dungeon 23. Definitely going to start on that. And just the last thought I'd say on it is, I think before we started the stream, I think Ben had said something that was interesting, which was you don't literally have to do a dungeon a day. You could just work on the dungeon every day, like add elements to the dungeon every day.
Yep, exactly. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to make one room a day, but yes.
Right.
Yes. Hey, we got a massive super chat from Great Role Playing Debbie. It says yes to Mega Dungeon for season 3, even as an optional sidetrack. I mean, by the time we get to season 3, Northern Reaches, I would say there's a reasonable chance that we won't be playing Pathfinder 2 or anything that resembles Pathfinder 2 in its current form. It'll be KOLC Vin Stratfinder.
Yes, please.
Ayla 2.0 version Ben Point Penguin. Which really just means there's a bone flail in it. Oh, they said meant to say season 2. Okay. I think what you're going to see for season 2 is people are going to make more dungeons. I don't know if they're going to make like the mega dungeon, but like, I think that they should. I think logistically, I think it makes sense for Northern Reaches. I think as a GM, you get a lot more bang for your buck out of making a dungeon and having to make something new every single time. Strat talked about the importance of reusing areas and getting to know those, and like that just plays so well into the Northern Reaches zeitgeist. Plus the ability for one group to learn something and then share it with the wider group, and then have them go and explore it. It's very West Marchian, and I think it's very much on theme. Now, there might be some logistical issues with the way that Pathfinder 2 works in terms of that exploration, but I don't think it completely shits on the idea like Strat does. So I will say that I still think that there is some merit there. So I think you're going to see that one way or the other there, Phoenix.
Yeah, I think.
And thank you for that super
Dungeons
chat.
Could work in PF2 Northern Reaches.
Yeah, I mean, Vlax did a great dungeon, and and so I definitely think it's doable. Like the classic survival horror dungeon, maybe not, but something else, I think so possibly. Okay, last but not least, Mr. Ben.
Definitely doing it.
Obviously, this was your idea.
Yeah, I doubt I'll run it or run any of it, to be truthful, just because the way I'm doing it, and I know what I'm doing it for, and no group will survive it. There's just no way. It will be unsurvivable, but it'll be interesting to put together because the biggest structures you have in Mothership, even an Acropolis, this is like multiples of that size. So there's just no way you can make it to the end. It'd be maybe an interesting theoretical challenge. Maybe when I'm done, I'll run I'll just theory craft some people through it, some NPCs to see what happens. But I can't imagine that they'll be able to mitigate the stress from taking its toll.
Yeah, I think Ben makes a great point. Maybe just do this for yourself. Don't worry about using it, turning it into a campaign, using it for Northern Reaches, playing it with your group or whatever. I think it's great to share your ideas. I don't think you should do it in a vacuum. Have other people view what you're working on, but don't feel like you need to make this into something that's production ready, because that's going to make you not do it, right? Because at the end of the year, if you have not even 360, if you have 200 rooms, they're all really short descriptions like snake around the jeweled ruby, and you never put any sort of Pathfinder stats or any sort of 5th edition stats. All you have is this kind of concept. And by the way, you'll know this place like the back of your hand. It'll be amazing. As a GM, you will like be Zen Buddhist on terms of like how well you can interact with. You're like, oh, are you talking about the room of the Crimson Serpent? Oh, I know that room well. But like, you don't ever need to put stats in, because that's going to scare you and that's going to keep you away from it. Right. So instead, you just got to lean into that and just say, I'm just going to do this. Just let me get the details in, or the basics in. Details, maybe someday, but you don't need the details unless you're going to run it. Right. Until you do that, it could be BX, it could be OSC, it could be Knave. It could be, right, Maze Rats. It could be Pathfinder 2. So it could be 1 D&D plus 6th edition 2.05, right? Like that's like the dressing. The ideas are what is most important here, you know?
Right. It could be completely system neutral.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that alone, it's more of your idea and the themes that I think are going to be the most important. So again, Denny, the idea here is Dungeon 23 is sort of a growing idea on Twitter and among certain content creators of basically doing a dungeon a day. And every day you're going to add one little room or sketch to a ever-growing dungeon, a so-called Megadungeon. The base theme is that 1 month is one level, and by the end of the year, you'll have a 12-level dungeon with somewhere between 25 to 31 rooms or whatever on each level, and you'll develop a sense for how things should connect to one another and build to one another, and it'll give you a real sense, I think, of how D&D operates as a game and as sort of a meta construct of this is what this game kind of is meant to do. It's called Dungeons. I mean, we call it Pathfinder, but it's called Dungeons and Dragons. Pathfinder's basically taken from that. And yeah, this is what the game was designed to do. The DNA has changed, but not that much. We're still using strength and dex and int and con and whiz and charisma and saving throws and armor class. The game really is very similar to the game that was played back in the 70s. And that game was built into this core chassis. And I think you'll sort of really get a sense of appreciation for it. So if you're interested, it's easy enough. Do a Twitter search, hashtag Dungeon23 Questing Beast. Ben Milton did an excellent video about it. You can go check that out. Self-confessed Cynic says, since the tip goal was reached, what does that mean? Well, it means that in 2023, I am going to go ahead and do this as well. I'm going to try to create a short each day where, just a 60-second short and say, today's room is the room of the jeweled serpent, the room of the crimson serpent. And, maybe add a little bit of details. I could see this connecting to this room and linking back with this. And then maybe like once a month, we'll kind of like take a step back and say, hey, let's talk about the level. Let's talk about the theme. Let's talk about the thing. Now, I see people going, oh my God, the pressure. Well, like anything, like we were just saying, we literally just spent the entire thing saying this. If you miss a day, it's not the end of the world. Just do 2 the next day, or say it was an empty room. Yes, it is coming after Battle Cry issue 3. Listen, I have off this week. I'm working on it. This is actually what I'm actually finally. My calendar of list of things is finally done. I didn't have a heart attack. Everything is great. Today's room is empty. Well, that's another great reason. By the way, that's another great reason to not put empty rooms in. If you ever have any hope of selling your product, imagine with a straight face selling that to somebody. They bought your work and then they go, literally, this person put room is empty, and then there's nothing of interest in this room, and you're like, that means that they pay. Like, I paid for that.
You can go with a pacer approach, where you have like 2 pages of description, 2 paragraphs of description, and it ends with nothing of that remains in this room. It's all crumbled to dust. Right.
Yeah, I would avoid using AI chatbots. Just do it yourself, people. Just, you can be inspired. You can roll on some random tables, but don't just, I made my own dungeon by going out and buying 6 other dungeons, and then I just copied a room from each of them for the day. Great roleplay. David says, "Come on, Derek, we doubled your goal. Do we get to extend?" Sure. Yeah, we'll keep this going for at least a few months. And then if it's fun and we're getting good response on it, and like I said, I'd love to have another feedback from one of these in maybe 4 weeks or 6 weeks, and we'll just say, hey, how are things going? What have you learned? Are you still doing it? Even Sean McCoy, who started this, said, I fully expect that there's going to be 2,000, 3,000 people doing this in January, and it's like new people at the gym, and then there's going to be 10 people that finish, right? But Knights of Last Call, not always the fastest to market, but we do always finish, okay? And I'll tell you this, if I can do, oh my God, I can't even believe I'm about to say this. If I could do 120 hours of coverage on Pathfinder 2nd Edition spells, okay, I can do anything, right? I can do anything. So, that lol archetypes went, fuck you. You don't even watch them. They're so bad. You know that is true. He's so pulling my shit right now because he absolutely knows he does not even watch those because they're so painful.
I think the joke in the Discord was at the end, it's just going to be Cybersmith watching Derek dead on a table reviewing archetypes.
Absolutely.
Like the opening scene in Blade Runner. It's just the two of them sitting across the table.
Yeah. Hey, guys. Today we're at the Zebra Handler. This is like the Beastmaster, but worse because you can only get a zebra. Anyways, Battlecry 3 soon. Archetypes when I feel like listen, I just had to do poppets, okay? Like give me a I built what I consider to be a pretty dang snazzy Pathfinder 2 boss using boss mechanics, okay? And it got killed by a bone flail from a Tarask and a 6-shooting phase gun and AoE fire damage, 100-foot burst, only targets my enemies. I don't even remember what other bullshit got used. Okay, I had to endure all of that. Okay.
Before you build kind of variants.
Kind of crazy GM would design such a thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, who would do that?
Exactly. Who would do that? Well, the good news is no one here because it would clearly be from a penguin. So. In any case, yes, Zebra Handler not in the game yet, but obviously it is coming soon. Okay, it's going to be in Rage of the Elements. Okay, that's going to be one of the archetypes. It's going to get released. And
the bad part is, I thought that was a real archetype when you said it.
Well, there is a Firework Handler, and by the way, they doubled down on that in Treasure Vault. They have some fireworks in Treasure Vault,
God.
And you can't make them, you can't use them unless you're a fireworks handler. So.
One of my players picked it up as a joke. I told him to fucking retrain it.
That's fantastic. Long story short, you guys obviously think this is a cool idea. I think it's a fun idea. I think it's a cool idea. So we're going to do this. We're going to support this as a channel. We're going to support this as our Patreon. So if you're interested in being a part of that, we're going to get a new forum set up. Currently, it's in Other Games Role, but we'll make a new one just so everybody can get access to it. And have a little bit more space to breathe there. And yeah, we'll support each other and we'll come up with some great resources and we'll try to learn and grow and develop as we continue to, as we always do here at Knights of the Last Call, is just coming up with new and better ideas. So yeah. All right. I think that's going to call it. I mean, for an impromptu stream here, we ended up going 3 hours and, we put this together last minute. So I want to say thanks to Strat, to Pumpkin, to Ben, for hopping on here at the last minute. Thank you to all to you. Again, I thought this was going to be a light week for me. I was going to take off and not do any live streams as a sort of just a fun recovery week. But I thought this was a great idea. I was happy to talk about it and, especially to get a chance to talk with some patrons and share my thoughts with all of you. So, subscribe if you like the content, if you want to be part of our Patreon so that you can get access to some of these resources, conversations, advice from these folks and from folks that you may have met in chat. I think that's a fantastic idea, and I think you should definitely think. Oh, very generous super chat from Great Role Playing Debbie. Very, very generous. Thank you. Homebrew KOLC Zebra Handler Archetype win. I'll tell you what. When we finish archetypes, okay, by that point in time, I will be so jaded on archetypes. I will be fully prepared to make a Zebra Handler archetype. So the answer of Zebra Handler archetype when we finish the archetypes. That we'll pen that to the end.
Super easy. There's like 4 Beastmaster archetypes. So there's a shared template. You just have to copy paste the words around.
Just put it in Battlecry 3.
Pace equality.
It'll be in Battlecry 3. Yes, we will do. Actually, it's perfect. It's a Z, so it's totally appropriate that it'll be at the very end. But we'll make it. And no, I'm not going to phone it in like the Paizo writers did. I'm going to actually create a Zebra Handler. It's going to be awesome. You're going to have the ability. It'll be able to cast confusion because the zebra stripes, right? It's in a herd. You don't know how to attack it. It has concealment because that's what the stripes do. It'll have something that's like not quite a horse. It'll be amazing. Yeah.
Just bringing these zebras into the dungeon. Like the
absolutely.
mental image of that is just amazing.
Right. It'll have if it's attacked by something with like that's a big cat, like they get a penalty to attack it. Yeah.
It has once per day safe passage because zebra stripes.
That's right. Exactly. So there you go. See, we got plenty of ideas. Yeah. So we are going. Zebras can't actually not be ridden. Rick Sherman. Huh. Oh, now we know what happens when you get to that level 18 ancestor or level 18 archetype feat. Zebra Rider. Zebra Rider. Yes,
Holy shit.
Samuel, this is obviously going to be. Oh no, Samuel, we're gonna make this thing busted as shit. This is gonna be like champion level. Like it's gonna be like, oh my god, he's a Zebra Rider. Holy shit, he's got lay on stripes, heavy zebra proficiency. It'll be amazing. The zebra counts as an apex item somehow. Like it'll be amazing.
Right.
So great flex from Phoenix there, also known
Like
as
once per day,
Yeah.
you can like climb into the zebra.
Oh
and,
right,
like somehow like hide inside it, like
Right.
a
right.
fort. Like what's the wondrous item becomes a fort?
Oh, Darren's Instant Fortress.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, but for the incredible support for this channel, thank you very much. Thank you for the generous gifts this week and this entire month. Everybody's been incredible with the chats and the tips and the super chats. Obviously, we've been having a lot of fun, and honestly, it's nice to see. We've done some strange stuff this month, right? We did a Pop It Holiday stream. We did a Fate stream. Today we talked about Megadungeon design, right? We're branching out. We're doing other things. We did a first look at Broken Compass, right? Like we're trying to do different things here at Knights of the Last Call. And while we will continue to talk about Pathfinder 2, as we always do, you're going to see more and more of this new stuff. And you all have been really supporting us on that venture. And so I really thank you for all of that. So, London, I agree. You were all terrible with your money, and I thank you for it. London says this as I calculated today that between the prizes that I'm going to be giving away in a few days for our Hero Point prizes, the shipping on all of the books that I have to send out, I think, and then the table, and now obviously the table's worth a lot of money, but in terms of my cost to me, in terms of raw material, ignoring my time, this month alone, I'm going to give away somewhere around $2,500. So,
Great business there.
great business model, Derek. But again, we made the decision. If you all are just keeping me solvent, you're basically investing into this community, which is investing into me, which is just getting right back invested into this community. And I do that because you all you've made this so much fun for me. If this really felt like a chore, and don't get me wrong, some days it does, and you know what days those are, but like if this was really a chore, I would have stopped doing it a long time ago. I don't need this money. I arguably don't really make that much money because of how much money we spend on it. Again, this month it was $2,000 of prizes. 2 months ago, it was $2,000 of foam and plywood to build a new studio, right? Next month, it'll probably be $2,000 of new shotgun microphones, or maybe a better camera or microphone for Smith, right? Like it's always something that we're just doing. We're just taking your generous donations, we're taking your Patreons, and we're just reinvesting it into the channel to make it as cool and as fun and as good as we could be. So, yeah. So thanks a lot, everybody. Everybody, you know what? Because there's so much hype for the archetype. We'll be back Thursday. I'll do the archetypes on Thursday. All right, I'll do archetypes on Thursday, and then we're gonna do a New Year's Eve stream on Saturday. Believe it or not, New Year's Eve last year, 2021, me and Tim was our very first live stream. So we are coming up on the 1 year anniversary of us doing our live streams. We've come a long way from then since then, and now we generally produce somewhere around 40 hours of content or something a month because of the freedom that live streams kind of gives us the ability to do. So, thank you for being so supportive of this medium and for watching it if on VODs or coming in here and live chatting with us. But we'll be back on Thursday to do archetypes so we can get to that Zebra Rider as fast. Darth Gorlock, Derek, this is the other thing I'm bad at too, Darth. I'm planning on taking it easy this week. Only 3 live streams. Right, but no work. So, that's at least that. What letter am I up to? Honestly, I'm so off with my titles because I keep saying like we're gonna do 3 letters, and then we don't even get through 1. So it's been a rough haul, real rough.
Derek, I implore you, just like the ones that are completely useless.
No,
Just
they all get their 10 minutes in the sun.
They're so
And
bad.
by the way,
They're so
by the way, because all of these people, Strat, because these people hate me, whenever there is a bad one and I skip it, do you know what happens every single time? $10 super chat. Derek, do the bad one. It happens every time. Umbral extraction, you pick a spell, like all of these horrible things. Anytime I try to skip them, everybody they love to see me suffer. Denny the Many, real quick, what do you call this? Mega Dungeon Challenge? No, it's called Dungeon 23, as in Dungeon 2023. So, Dungeon apostrophe 23 is what I would actually call it. But the idea is that you're going to be building a dungeon in 2023. Yeah, thank you, Ben. All right, last comment. Strat, you were trying to say something. I'm sorry.
I've made more tier lists than I should have for this goddamn game.
That's true.
And even I just skipped it, the archetypes, just going like, this dedication feat's bad. F, go on.
You got to go deep, man. You got to dig deep. And by the way, I got people going, are you going to go back and do all the focus spells? What about all the cantrips? Can we see all items ranked when? If I got
archetypes are bad.
If I made $1,000 a stream, I don't know. I don't know that I would do all items ranked.
Somebody convinced me on the Patreon. I've got like multiple item categories fully ranked. I will post those if there's interest.
DM Gary, jokes aside, when is the Treasure Vault stream? So the deal with the Treasure Vault stream is officially we're not allowed to talk about the Treasure Vault. Paizo has given us a date. We're not really sure. There was kind of talk about us being able to maybe make a preview release, but not a review. So we're really not allowed to talk about it or share about it until Paizo gives us the no head. Jesus Christ, Debbie. All cantrips when. That one's easy. Electric Arc S. Everything else is like D and F tier. That one's super easy. Honestly, Debbie, if we get to the point where we have so little content to do, and that people are, I need to disconnect my bank account from YouTube. I agree. You're giving this money to me, and I completely agree with you.
Phoenix has come a long way from that $2 tip.
Listen, I'm assuming Phoenix is just drinking, and this is just coming in, just building up as we go through it. But no, here's the thing. What I need to do, here's the problem. It's just hard for me to do this because you all know me and I talk a lot. We could do a cantrip stream, like one of them, where we just very quickly say, here are some of the great ones, here are some of the bad ones, here's, instead of going into excruciating detail about each and every single one. That's just not the style that we tend to do here at Knights of the Last Call. But we did do that, for example, with the classes, right? We didn't go through every feat. We just said, here are the class rankings at the low levels, the middle levels, and the high levels. It took us 3 streams. So I probably wouldn't do that. I would probably do something more like that for cantrips. So I'm not opposed to doing that. There is a completionist part of me that would love to say, yep, here we have it all. You can see the full shitstorm and all of its splendor. And see that 70% of these things are just horrible. But we need to do it on the right thing. We're not, because that's just not compelling enough to really rank cantrips. Like, is this cantrip A tier or B tier? Like, we're really splitting hairs there.
Most used spells in the game?
See, I don't think so. I don't agree with that because once you're like level 3 or 4 and people are having 2 encounters a day, you're not running out of spell slots.
Yeah, but like EA is good as opposed to most other spells.
I guess. I don't know. I mean, EA might be the one exception, but
most play is at those early levels though. So
that too.
Yeah, but then you just make a fighter, and then that's it. So you're just done there. Apparently, Phoenix is totally sober, and that is just incredible. All right, everybody. I'm actually going to go. We're going to be back Thursday. We're going to be back Saturday. Vin's saying I should get a hero with me to help judge archetypes. I would love to have somebody. If somebody wants to sign up from the hero tier, let me know. If you want to be in for that pain and suffering. It's a rough one, people.
No.
And and we are hard at work. Aaron and Bob are getting ready for season 2 Northern Reaches. We're putting the final touches on our next issue of Battle Cry. We're getting ready for some fun Patreon changes that are going to mean more gaming opportunities for the patrons. And I got to say, this has nothing to do with me. There are like a million games that are being played right now in our community games. We've got games of Blaze in the Dark, Pathfinder in the Dark. We've got a thriving play-by-post game, which I kind of completely flew under my radar. Apparently, it's got something like 6,000 or 7,000 posts in just a few weeks. So again, huge thanks to everybody. I had a lot of fun with John, who came on and donated some Fate books, and I know that Rick wants to do a similar thing for Traveler, donate some Traveler books. So incredible community that I cannot say enough great things about. So even if you don't like me, and you probably don't, chances are you'll probably like these people. So it's worth paying your $5 or $10 a month. Come in, hang out with them, and just ignore me, block me. I don't care. I'm not even that great. Okay. Well, thanks a lot, everybody, for joining us. And thank you to my guests. Thank you to Strat. Thank you to Pumpkin. Thank you to Ben for joining and staying on a little late with me. And we'll see you all next time on Knights of Last Call.
Bye.
I need you more.